Alright guys, welcome. Part 2 of Need for Review of Need for Speed Unbound episode 9. We couldn't quite finish that episode last time. I said it mid-video, but I was really tired. Why was I tired? Why am I streaming then? I came home from a football match and it was long, it was exhausting, and yeah. That's the story of it. And I realized I got really dizzy, and I didn't want to finish like that. So that's that. I feel like I'm really yellow here. Yeah, that doesn't look right. Filters. Ah. Um. Does that look like I'm a normal person? Bro, this shitty ass Twitch app, bro. No. No? Guys, I don't care, bro. Let's just have it like that. Alright. Yeah. So, I was really tired and I just didn't want to finish it like that. But now I have noodles. I made them myself. Put some cheese on it. Had some jam, some tomatoes, some onions. And put it all into a pasta. We had some eggs. Crushed eggs. Not crushed. Eggs mixed with salt and pepper and a little bit of cream. And now we're gonna top it off with some high quality ketchup while we're watching. Illest streaming. Watch that, watch that, watch that. So we went until here, and then we have these two videos that I want to watch. That's what we're gonna do.
Unbound, free, unshackled by limits. That is what the name stands for. With a new art style and story beats, Unbound seek to differentiate itself from the three other games in its era. It's a great.
So that's a review 1.5 years after it came out. So it's 2 months old. Let's see what he has to say.
Game. is it? Unbound strays away from that of a traditional art style for a game of this archetype, in favor of something much more innovative. Yes, I'm talking about these ever so controversial anime effects. Though cool at first glance, this visual flair does not exist to simply distract the player from the action at hand. Rather, its purpose is to emphasize the coolness of it. Cartoon smoke arises from tires as drifts are made. Light trails emanate from taillights when driving above 100 miles an hour. Wings draw themselves on the side of the car when catching airtime. The car looks mischievous when crashing a cop car, giving me that little smile. Though most apparent are the effects bundled with the new burst nitrous system. Sparks fly out when gaining it, and the camera is forcefully hurled back when used. The full 3-bar charge doesn't even make you go that much faster, but it doesn't matter because you feel like you're driving at the speed of light, and going fast is
It did matter. To me it mattered, and it almost, the burst NOS and generally the nitro, it left me, bro. It always left me behind, and I feel betrayed by the nitro. So, and I also caught that with the effect, and that pissed me off, bro, because it looked like I'm gaining, and then I see in the top left, and I see that the opponent is catching up to me, or even worse, getting farther away from me on the track. So
is fun. Cel-shaded characters are icing on the cake. While by no means an original concept in the world of gaming, they provide an excellent contrast to the game's realistically rendered cars, the same style that the aforementioned anime effects seek to achieve. Yet this visual style and aesthetic does not pertain strictly to the gameplay. The rest of Unbound is bursting to the seams with character and style, the logo exploding with energy and style in the start screen, rap beats playing in free roam that ramp up in pursuits, race and cop icons on the map include doodle.
The art style for what it is fit together, it fit into the game, and I feel like it was consistent. I mean, theoretically they could have made the cars the same, but I feel like that would have been crazy hard with licensing. So
the same map which displays photos of Yaz and Rydell from before the events of the game on the side. Scattered around its border are random receipts and objects from the game's world. These changes might sound minor, but they bring so much character and charm to a genre that hasn't seen anything remotely close to it in years. These effects never come off as needlessly shoehorned in either. Unbound's open world is gray and dreary for a reason. It was crafted this way to make this art style appear more exuberant and distinct. This consolidation of effects and style differentiate Unbound from all of its contemporaries of this genre and scale. No other modern AAA racing game will touch something this divergent with a 10-foot barge pole. Their implementation encroaches on nothing and makes your Need for Speed burn ever so brighter. Car handling has undergone a considerable improvement in Unbound. For the longest time, Need for Speed games took the word arcade to the fullest extent of the word. Cars felt incredibly stable and were next to impossible to spin out. While fun, it was a safe kind of fun. There was rarely, if ever, a danger of losing.
yeah, but that's what it should be, bro.
Control. Unbound seek to change this, making cars feel less safe with its revamped handling model. Your actions now have a significantly higher level of weight to them. You can no longer blast through turns with reckless abandon. Oversteering and as a result spinning out is now a genuine concern. You're driving supercars, climbing the speedometer in increments of hundreds. Did you think that would be comfortable? Pushing the analog stick too far to the left or to the right causes cars to spin out of control, and thus comes with a reason to drive carefully. Traveling at 200 miles per hour entails a visceral sense of dread to the player, something absent in games of this genre since, as far as I can recall, 2011's shift to Unleashed. It's still nowhere near as dramatic as that game, but the sensation of being at the edge of control is present. The increased field of view, combined with the fact that a simple mistake could cost you the entire race, makes this ever so thrilling. Grip turns are much improved. For far too long, they were not practically usable. You needed to be a good driver, know when to brake.
That is cool, but before that, you were just able to go full speed, brake before corner, take a relatively smart racing line, and still keep up with everything. Even if the other guys were drifting or were overpowered AI. That's not possible anymore, because usually the most of the cars get into a drift and then just spin out.
Brake and how.
And they start to drift and they don't actually drift because the drifting is ass in this.
to take corners properly. Why would you want to do that when you can cheese through every corner with the drift mechanic? Well, there was no answer. Even I didn't do it. In Unbound, however, it's given a use, even encouraged. Performing them successfully now awards Burst Nitrous, giving the player a short burst of speed to catch up with everyone else. My brother, Dr. Grip Turns, was happy about it. But what is Burst Nitrous? Earned by doing near misses.
The idea with Burst Nos is cool in the game, since both nitros were weak. I feel like they undercooked it. And it also, I don't know, it didn't feel so cool. I like that you could see how much you got rewards for it, and I also feel like grip turns actually rewarded you way more burst nos than drift. Like, there's no possible drift that I could make in a race that would get me as much burst nos as a good grip turn, while still doing something smart in the race and keeping up with pace or catching up or holding first place.
Drafts, drifts, grip turns, and the like. It encourages risky driving and rewards you with a short explosion of energy. It also encourages you to take risky maneuvers to fill it. The catch, however, is that this nitrous is only available for a brief fleeting moment. If you wait too long, it expires and is no longer usable. This results in a constant debate as to whether or not you want to pass someone or fall back under the premise that it's not worth the risk of crashing into something. I'm using
you should have been able to keep it a little bit longer. Like, even 3 to 5 seconds more would have done so much to make it cooler.
the word debate in a positive light here. It's fun and adds an entirely new layer of depth to a mechanic that has lay stagnant for many years. So the handling model is good, but what about the cars which operate by it? Unbound has a myriad of cars ranging from mighty SUVs to nimble exotic, yet it doesn't take a genius to realize that it's a mere copy of its predecessor. Putting these two side by side, newer cars are nowhere near as prevalent as one might expect them to be. For a game released in the 2020s, it sure does hesitate to include cars from its era. Unbound falls into the trap.
Bro, all the cars from this era nowadays are SUVs. there are those crazy hypercars that come out and SUVs. There's no cool raceable cars that come out nowadays. Nobody wants a sedan anymore. Nobody wants a cool hatchback. Like, and if you ask me if I want a totally new version of some Honda Civic or like the 2000 Civic, I'm taking the second one. That's it. It's a mirror of the car industry nowadays. There is no cool race cars coming out, or raceable cars, or JDM cars, or whatever. They're not coming out. Everybody's driving an SUV now. Everybody's building an SUV. Or like those mini cars.
Not including many new models. Whether this is due to manufacturers...
Does he have examples for cars that would actually make sense to be in?
Growing stingier of licensing their cars to games about illegal street racing, or EA simply not wanting to spend the money, or something else entirely?
That can be. Because I swear there's like almost every big relevant car company is in this game. So that can be it.
Entirely, I can't say for sure. But for fans of Heat, it is a major letdown. 13 new cars at launch, 2 being removed from Heat, are simply too few, and certainly too far between for an entirely new game. Need for Speed takes a customization focused...
It's not an entirely new game. The game still kind of feels the same. Besides the effects, it still kind of looks the same. Same game mechanics, and it's still Need for Speed, I actually like that it's more or less similar, and you have, like, it was good. I don't think there's a reason to change it, and they added some cars. Okay, it's not a lot, but like, nobody needs 300 cars in a game like that. We had bought like 5 cars or so, at best, and then we saved for the Ferrari. Maybe if we were going all out, we did all the races, we could have gotten like what, 10 cars from the races. Oh, we also won the 4 from the leagues, from the Grand. Like, we could have been at 25 or 30 cars. Then we also would have never gotten enough money to upgrade all those cars to the extent we wanted to. And what else do you use? And then they have to be from all different tiers or put somewhere, because we're not driving 15 different cars in one tier.
Approach, I understand, but the novelty of those 13 cars fades quickly and results in Unbound's list feeling a bit too familiar to Heat. There is never an incentive.
That's not bad. That's not bad though.
A burning desire in your heart to drive one of the new cars, given how rare they are. Compounding onto this are Unbound's arbitrary car unlock restrictions. Certain cars, most of which are copied from Heat mind you, are locked behind meaningless challenges. Awarding special designs or variants of these cars would be acceptable, but locking base models comes off as a silly way to force completion, not encourage it. Sentencing players to the punishment of smashing each and every billboard is a tedious and long process, and a worthless one at that. These restrictions exist for the sake of existing, not for the sake of adding any value to gameplay. But we have yet to discuss Unbound's map. And what a map it is. Nighttime, daytime, and overcast days look fantastic. Water droplets realistically accumulate on cars the way you've come to expect. These race intro cutscenes are the developers showing off. You don't have to inspect every frame to see the improvement off of the 8th generation consoles. Shader quality is much improved. Reflections playfully bounce off of cars in the environment. Buildings are meticulously detailed. Shadows realistically form around objects. And skyboxes are as real as skyboxes can be. Just look at that horizon. Yet it's not just a graphical upscale. For the first time in a Need for Speed game, people are finally visible in the world. They walk, talk, build stuff, and do whatever people do. Their presence breathes life into Lakeshore and makes Heat cities look abandoned in comparison. People live here, and it's obvious. But what about beyond the mom look it's...
The humans, I am not sure. Maybe someone here has a good suggestion. But like, the humans, it looks cool. And yes, the world doesn't seem dead. But it's a racing game. And just think that out for yourself. Daytime, we get out on a Monday, 0 heat. We start the first race, and we then drive, I don't know, 2 kilometers on a pier at the coast, close to a beach. 8 cars, 8 heavily modified cars, with NOS, spoilers, side skirts, smoke balls, all going 230, pushing 300 kilometers an hour on a beach pier that has, let's say on this whole strip, several hundred people on it. Bro, in GTA, you earn yourself so fast 5 stars for that. It's insane how fast that goes. And here we just drive a race, and until we don't run into a cop car, they don't even bother doing something. And you know, they made the mechanics nice that you can't actually run over people, otherwise this would be an FSK a Peggy 18 game. But like, if I turn with my car 90 degrees onto a crossroad and there's 5 people standing exactly where I'm at, I'm going in there with like 450 kilometers an hour. No fucking human on this planet manages to dodge that, let alone a group of 5 people. And then 8 cars are doing the same thing. It's not realistic, and it's just weird. It would make more sense if there was people watching the races, a distance between stands, or just some border or wall behind or whatever. And you know, they would know the races are on and they want to see it. But that doesn't happen. It's like they want me. It's like they want me to believe that 8 cars drive over a pedestrian walk. Somehow don't kill all the people, which they usually would. Drive high. Nobody calls the police. Police doesn't come. Police just spawns because it spawns in every race. And doesn't do something. No, we also had this subplot with the mayors, they're like, oh, racing so bad, won't be. Oh, this person is so bad. I do the same. Blah blah blah. It would be cool if there was a race that we do where actually someone gets hurt who doesn't have anything to do with the races, and that gets weaponized for it, and then we somehow played a part in that happening or something to, think about what we're doing actually or something. But no, we just had these brain rot paroles from these politicians on podcasts and ads and then like those 2 or 3 guys that we picked up to the safe houses. Yeah, that's what's all about community, blah blah blah, and those shells of meaningless words.
Real factor. I find that maps and racing games are easy to overlook, and Lakeshore sure was overlooked. While nowhere close to previous games in theme variety, Lakeshore is incredibly varied in structure. It's got everything you need: highways, tightly knit city roads, bridges, collapsing bridges even. Your surroundings constantly change. Houses reside in suburban areas, parking garages are found near.
That's true. I feel like It works for the game. Looks pretty good for the game. And it's varied, but like very specific areas that can do specific stuff. And I want to say there's like barely any part of the map where I'm like, driving along here is so beautiful. I feel like Heat and Payback had way more instances of where you would just free roam through the map or like drive, and you would have an incredible scene in front of you. I think in Unbound here there's like one in like the west or southwest where you are like in the mountains, and then you get out and you have like this very huge bridge, and under that there's also lift, but you're like really high up and you have even a view on the sky, on the skyline of the city and so on. That's cool. That's really beautiful. Like that's it. And I feel like Heat and Payback had some more of those, but just generally looked a little bit cooler. But it's not bad. By all means, it's not bad. It's very
near public spaces. Narrow roads wind over mountainous terrain while tunnels go under them. The Ferris wheel is a sight to behold, and none of this is taking into account the Porsche test track, which, by the way, is not the only racetrack in the game. I could go on. Criterion did go on. Out of all the feelings I got driving around this map, Deja Vu was never one of them. But don't forget that this is a racing game map, and it sure has that Criterion DNA rooted into it. Stadiums and columns are visible, yet don't exist as mere set pieces. They're ramps for you to jump off of, drive on, and smash things with. One racetrack is shaped like an oval and has a huge ramp for you to catapult your cars with. Yes, it is disappointing that
What did he say?
As mere set pieces. They're ramps for you to jump off of, drive on, and smash things with. One racetrack is shaped like an oval and has a huge ramp for you to catapult.
This dude, bro. This ramp. Okay, you need to have some imagination for that. But this guy clearly never has watched winter sports. This is how do you say it in English, the word? This is the long jump. This is a long jump trap. Like, let me go back.
Drive on, smash things with. One.
This right here is where you, as a skier, you are in your suit, gloves on, or maybe not, and then you're on 2 skis. And then this ramp is right on. You just put yourself onto 2 tracks and you go down until you reach this point. And you go, you bend your knees, and when you're at the end of it, you jump up.
Racetrack is shaped like an oval.
Just like you drive there. And this is filled with snow, and these marks are actual marks to mark how far you have jumped.
Ramp for you to catapult.
And then this here is also filled with much more snow. And this is for the long jumper to have some some space to actually caught himself and like deaccelerate and like make a turn and just stop somewhere instead of just crashing into something, especially when something goes wrong.
Your cars with. Yes, it is with. One racetrack is shaped like an oval and has a huge ramp for you to catapult your cars with. Yes. It is disappointing that the roads obviously intended for drifting can't be drifted on properly thanks to this game's physics, and it is a bit jarring watching certain destructibles disappear without any animations. But Lakeshore is a playground for racers, and a hugely entertaining one at that. But what about any animations?
No,
but Lakeshore is
a
playground for jarring watching certain.
Worst part about it is that stuff like this is easily breakable, and it's just like you're just driving through like it doesn't exist, and it doesn't stop you. It barely even makes a sound, like most stuff.
Certain destructibles disappear without any animation.
And it's so easily destructible, but like these things look almost completely the same, especially now you don't see them, and these are indestructible. They're not even slightly destructible, or if you drive really fast you can destruct them. No, they're not destructible at all. It's like they're like as strong as this whole house complex. That doesn't make sense. Don't do this.
Is a playground for racers, and a hugely entertaining one at that. But what about the street scene which resides within it? Well, luckily for Unbound, it's also seen a dramatic improvement in this regard, namely character rivals. They're great. A problem that previous entries had was that nothing felt personal. Sure, you're in a heated competition, but an impersonal that also seen a dramatic improvement in this regard.
Dramatic improvement is not what I would call that.
Namely,
this is one improvement, and it's a big improvement. I really like that. In Heat, these were also characters. They just didn't have this lobby screen where you would actually see them like that. But since we have like one mission with almost every single character, not even all of them, and then you have this stick map. Bro. Okay, sorry. And that's it. The problem with why that isn't so cool is that Justicia is almost in every race. Obi is almost in every race. Varu especially is in every race almost. Booz is in every race. Justicia is also in every grand game. Children is always in any grand game. This guy, I've never seen this guy. This guy had never raced a race with me. We have Shimizu always, we have Lyric always, we had Chacha always. Like, I can name those guys and I have never talked to them or anything. They were always driving the races. We drove, I don't know, 150 races or so, and it was the same, let me say 30 people. At best 30 people. Yeah, probably, it was like 20 to 25. Over B, A plus, S plus. Over 5 different categories of race cars. 20 people. You would drive the same people. In the Heights League, I would still have Justicia driving. It doesn't make sense. They barely even change their cars. They're driving the same car up to S plus or S. Doesn't matter what. It's the same car, just has a different rating number on it. They don't even have different cars. It doesn't make sense, you know. They're all also driving these races. They should have also a ton of money, most of them. So why don't they have different cars when they're driving in different leagues? Or just don't have them drive in different leagues and compete with us. But then this would also be kind of weird, considering the grant, because then we would drive against different people always. But then, you know, we'd still qualify somehow, because like I wasn't the only one who qualified. So it would kind of make sense. But then also, you know, you had the grant with like 4 different races. So we didn't drive against we did drive against the same people. But they had like the same cars in every class again, which just simply doesn't make any sense, right? And then you have also to consider these people, we never see them. Or we see them just like that. There's nobody watching the races. There's just these meetups, and these meetups are like literally just this screen. And nobody's watching the races. Nobody's in there. Then there's also the thing where we have races on racetracks and we still have police coming to us, which doesn't make sense. We have indoor drift events and we get cops. We have those takedown events, which are indoor, mostly, not all of them, and we still get cops on it. So that's not an improvement. That's a downgrade. This feels like a good concept, but that concept didn't exist from the get-go. That existed later, and they just didn't have the time to completely fulfill that. So they just didn't completely do it, and that's why they have so few characters. But it's not a big improvement. I would say it got worse. Then again, the bet thing is really cool. It's extra income. Even in the races where you're driving for a car, you can bet Justicia for $500 or $700. You win the car, and because you won, you also get money from her. Or you bet on A$AP Rocky to win, and then you win and you get the extra money. That's really cool. And even if you're not the best, you can still bet against the lower guys when you get into the Monday on a new week and you just have barely a good car for the race tier. That's really cool. They should keep that. That's really good. But overall, I don't think it's really good, actually. I think it's mid. I'd say it's worse than before, for sure. It's not downright bad, but it's nowhere near good.
Character rivals. They're great. A problem that previous entries had was that nothing felt personal. Sure, you're in a heated competition, but an impersonal one. At the end of the day, you're racing against an AI that's simply doing its job. It doesn't have anything against you, and so you don't have anything against it. That rivalry, that antagonism, that hatred for a specific enemy or enemy type was rarely fostered. Unbound seek to change this. You're up against real people. Well, as real as lines of code being run by the game's engine can be, but that doesn't matter. This personification of real people, names, identities, and customized cars all make you want to beat them in a way that mere position numbers and randomly generated names simply cannot. It's personal and immersive. These characters comment when you hit them, when they pass you, and sometimes even give you vague threats.
Yeah, but
they'll brag about being in a winning
lines.
Position and lament about being in a bad one. That rivalry is nurtured.
I mean, to be honest, that was fun. You know, we had some banter with these guys.
Well past your limits just to wipe that smile off of your opponent's faces. It's an amazing feeling betting with them and taking their money. But that's just one side of the coin, and sadly, only one is favorable. Lakeshore is a city home to some of the most exuberant street racing on the planet. Well, at least that's what EA would want you to think. That intro cutscene with your starter car crashing into the screen, people talking, waiting by the sidelines, the police intruding on a meetup is not upheld by the rest of the game. Because when you head to a meetup, the police intruding on a meetup is not upheld by the rest of the game.
Especially since there was many races where like, yeah, the police is up to it, or the police really wants to shut down the grant this week or whatnot, and it just never happened.
Game. Because when you head to a meetup, it never comes off that way. It's nowhere near as alive. Misleading? No, but it is disappointing. Let's talk characters. While great in races, their largest issue is that their quantity is severely limited. There's like 15 of them in all of Lakeshore. Sure, they're detailed, but 15 in this entire city? Then who's causing that street racing problem that the mayoral candidates keep prattling on about? I might not be the sharpest tool in the shed at times, but even I can tell that sounds like something that more than 15 people would have to do to garner a statewide level of attention. What compiles onto this and makes this street scene, or lack thereof, come off as even duller is the absence.
Okay, thank you. He realized what he sees it. But like, don't say it's a massive improvement in the first sentence. He's relative. He's balancing his statement. That's good.
Of any fans. They exist.
See? No fans. I said it.
Sure, yet nobody appears to be making side bets, cheering on as races begin.
That's also funny. Usually there should be, I mean, it's a bigger concept, but like, there should be people betting for and against us.
Or showing off their own cars. Heat, while not perfect, exemplified this masterfully, with fans.
This was really cool in Heat. It literally just was. And then also in this game and the games before, you would usually have the people drive away with you and, get lost and flee from the cops.
Fans posing for pictures in front of your car as the race began, and watching in awe as the competition blew past the starting line. Meanwhile, in Unbound, it's barren. It's empty. The street scene feels artificial more than it does a group of young racers hanging out with their cars, and it hurts the vibe more than anything. A group this small is akin to a singular team more than it is an entire underground culture. But I haven't even brought up the game's crowning fault in this regard. Nobody is driving around. Lakeshore feels abandoned. It's a playground, sure, and a live-looking one definitely, but it isn't alive with street racing. Part of what made me admire the Crew Motorfest in spite of its laundry list of issues was its world. How Hawaii felt alive. How watching those cars race independent of my participation in it made the game feel like it had a beating heart. That festival will live on without my presence, yet Unbound street racing scene never shows itself in its open world. I bring up the mayoral argument again. Throughout Unbound, it's constantly told to you that street racing is a rapidly growing problem in Lakeshore, and that the police are doing everything they can to put a stop to it. The game does nothing to convince you of this. No
Yeah. It was such a useless subplot. It it's like nothing happened about it. They did nothing with that. They were just yapping, and we had like me crashing out over it because I wanted to say something about the gameplay or what I want to do next, what are my thoughts. And you just had this annoying voice talking over the whole time, muting the rest of the game.
Street racer aside from yourself is ever seen driving around outside of a race. No racers are visible mid-pursuit with the police, no races are visible apart from the ones you take part in, nobody attends car meets or events, heck man, nobody even drives into the meetups like they do in the intro. Heat's night races with every racer quickly scurrying off in their own direction after crossing the finish line were significantly more immersive than Unbound's end screen, with your rivals simply despawning thereafter. Lakeshore is empty and barren at a time when it needed to be alive more than any other in the franchise. While we're on the topic of Heat, however, something that it did well was its police system. Does Unbound have a good one? Let's take a look at what it does well first. It's been said before, but the new enemy variety differs.
Ooh, is he saying bad? Ooh, let's
take a look at what it does well first. It's been said
this Heat system, bullshit, bro. Worst of it all are the days where you start with Heat already. This mechanic is ass because first of all, there is like 6 to 20 races or race events on different meetups that you can make every day and every night. Different ones. On Tuesday, daytime, there's specific events, and then in the nighttime, Tuesday night, there's other events. Not the same ones. Different events, different pricing, different everything. Then they return and reoccur, okay, but they're gone. And if they return, they probably have a different price pool or they're in a different class or whatnot. The race itself is the same, that's the boring part. The worst part is the good price pool is one night there and the other day it's gone. One time it's in a race class where you have a car, and the next time it's in a race class where you don't have a car or not a good car or whatever. Every race gives you heat. You can go up to 5 heat, and when you start the game, the story, you have weak cars. There is not one B tier car where I'm comfortable with getting away from police. 4 heat is the maximum where you can I, as a good driver or good Need for Speed gamer somehow, or like a confident one, felt like I can get away from the cops with my Mitsubishi Eclipse. And that was genuinely probably the best B tier car that you could find. I don't think there's actually a B tier car that's better than this one. 5 heat was instant death. If it was nighttime, it was just not possible. If we got into a heat into a chase and we were down bad, we were gone. The gas station system for these B tier cars is just way too unforgiving. Because these Heat 5 trucks, they kill you. We were a few seconds ahead. The different types of cars, police cars, very nice. That's really cool. I really like that. Generally, I don't like that even the smaller cars like this one, you can barely crash into them and actually, destroy them. I'd rather have them throw more cars at me, but I have the chance to destroy them than what it was now, because some cars were untouchable. I think in the lower difficulties it was easy, but in the higher difficulties, those heat-free cars, I don't know, the was it Dodges or Chevrolets or I don't know which one. Like those speedy heat-free cars, they would always catch up no matter what, and they would always drive in front of you. If you would speed up or use a nitro, they would, same as you, get faster so you could never hit them from the back. And it was just not possible to take them out. They were always in front of you. So the only thing you could do is make a right turn or left turn. And get rid of them. Which in the city was pretty easy, because you just make a turn, and if they're in front of you, they're gonna fall behind. So that's how you get rid of them fast. With the other cars, they were slower, so they were behind you, they would still be behind you. If you messed up at some point, they would crash into you. Those Heat 5 thingies especially would be lethal. They do so much damage. If you're not on your top speed or in a slower car, they catch up to you no matter where you're driving. Even with an S car, on A plus car, S car that is not really upgraded, they catch up to you, they follow you, and they crash into you. If you wanted to go on a ramp, they would bash you off it. And you couldn't steer against them. You couldn't even, like, you both drive and he wants to crash into you and you do too, and then you just go forward. No, they would crash into you and they would ram you off. It would be like that, nothing else. So, my point being, you can make 4 races in the daytime, which are very low paying or low class, and you get, I don't know, 10 to 12,000 if you win them all. Then you are at Heat 4 and you're going to the night. If you do 2 races that pay good, you are at Heat 5. Even if you do the small races and you go into the night comes and you are at 4 heat. You get out, you have already 10,000 cops on every corner and every 200 meters spawning. There's way too many cops. After you have hit heat free, you will run into the problem that you finish a race no matter what time, and you will have a cop chase. You will have a cop chase almost after every single race, no matter if you're heat 1, 0, 3, 4, 5, whatever. There's too many cops. It's always like that. Even when you drive in a S Plus Lotus EV and you blew your whole competition, you're like 2 kilometers far ahead, there's no police car around you, you spawn, you're standing still, you start to race, and behind you there's 2 or 3 or 4 cop cars. For no reason. Doesn't make sense. So you have to outrun them. If you're in a slow car, Mitsubishi Eclipse or my Nissan 370, they would always fight. They would always be in a cop chase. So in the night, you can make basically one race, maybe two if you feel like a big cocky guy. Other than that, you can't do it. So you have a day and a night cycle of one day. And in that day and night cycle, there is like, let's say 24 races. So 12 a day and 12 in the night. Different ones. Some endurance races, let's say 3 endurance races, 2 head-to-head races, 4 corner kings, 3 different drift events, 4 or 5 takeover events, some sprint races, some in the cities, some on the outside of the city, some in the suburbs, whatever. You can do 5 or 6 of them, and the whole rest you miss out on. You can physically not do them. Not in the first 2 weeks. If you have an S or an S Plus car, you could possibly do it, but then you do 3 races on Wednesday daytime, and after that you're constantly on 5 heat, and there's nothing you can do except you're just constantly running away from the cops. And if you're not using jumps, really catchy in the city, on the streets, you're going to die. If you're just on a highway constantly, even with a really fast car, you're not getting away from any cops. And then you also have to get to the events, and then there's so many cops spawning. It's really stressful, and you constantly feel like you're missing out on something. And then there's races you can't do. But you have to do the races because you need money. Why do you need money? You need money to get a better car, upgrade your current car, and you need to have the buy-in on Friday night. By Friday night, or by Saturday morning, however you want it. And the buy-in would always be a lot of money in the context of the economy of the current week. So in the first week you need to have 20 grand. That was a lot. Second week you needed 50 grand. That was a lot. Then third week you needed 100 grand. That was a lot. Fourth week you needed 200 grand. That was a lot. So that was tough. Really tough. So you either drive 2 races every day and every night, and you just barely ever get 5 heat and have it somewhat comfortably, and you just miss out on many races or on race cars or whatever. Or you do that, and then at some point you use an A car, an A plus car, and a B car, and you are really fucked if you get caught with 6 cop cars behind you after you finish a race. Maybe you crashed into something, or somebody crashed into you prior from the cops. You had half your health bar, and you make a turn, and just some SWAT car crashes you, and your health bar is here, and then you have to get away. Be crazy, and you lose everything. Like, that's wild, bro. So in Heat, it was more like you had also 5 tiers of Heat, but you would get Heat for more things than races. You get Heat for races, yes, but you would also get Heat for hitting jumps, destroying stuff, I think. Like stunts where you like crash those wallpapers or whatever. And for the speed zones, you would also get Heat. But not a lot. You would get like points, and then they would stack up. You could have 2.1 heat, 2.2 heat, 2.3, 2.4 heat, 2.8 heat, 2.9 heat, and 3-point heat, and it will go on. And if you did races, it would also give you like a couple of thousand heat points, and it would be go from 0 to 0.5 or something. Then you go to 1.2, go to 1.8. It would be way slower. And the more you would be up during the nighttime. So first of all, during daytime there was heat, I think, or you would also have cop chases. But if you were doing a race, you would not get heat on it because the races were legal, because it was daytime. It was legal, organized race events. They were fine. Then in the night, you would also drive to get experience EP. And this is what you would race the races for, because the more EP you get, the more cars you unlock, and the further you can progress into the story. And then, depending on how much heat you have, you would have a multiplier. So with one heat, you would have a multiplier of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the more races you do, the more heat you get. The more heat you get, the much more multiplied the heat or the experience you already won you get. So you do a lot of races and a lot of speed zones and traps and whatnot. You'll be at 4 heat, and that will be already a lot of experience you get. But then it will be multiplied by 4, and it will be way more. It will be actually payoff. Anything above heat 3 would be really crazy cobs. So there will be a gamble. Do I do actually that much, or do I not do it? But if I do it and I make it home safe, I get a lot of heat and experience. I don't get a lot of heat. I get a lot of experience, and it's worth it. If I get caught, well, then that's gone. But like, it's only the experience. But I can choose which races I do and whatnot, and the races won't disappear. So, lots of yapping from me. We continue the video. Let's see what he has to say.
New enemy variety, different cop cars deployed at increasingly high heat levels is much appreciated. It encourages players to use strategy to weave their way out of chases in interesting ways, as opposed to simply gunning it and hoping for the best. Chargers are your basic enemy. They're weak all around and aren't as fast. It's fine for...
They were the weakest of them, but like they were still so heavy. But that's something about the game physics. I don't like the game physics where these cars feel like they're trucks or tanks. If I drive into it at 240 kilometers an hour, this shit has to go flying.
Cars that patrol the streets. Explorers are strong but slow. They aren't as nimble as you, but they can deal a lot of damage. Corvettes, on the other hand, are fast but weak.
The Corvettes were crazy. And the Corvettes, they were stronger than the Heat 1 cars. They were not as weak as he's saying. And there were much more of them, and they were more intelligent.
Easily keep up with any supercar, but can just as easily be taken out with evasive maneuvers, or by going off-road where they...
Yeah, but these maneuvers kill basically any cop car. Even the Heat 5 SWAT cars. They crash into these blockades, they would also die first time.
Suffer a loss in control. Undercover Camaros are where things get spiced by going off-road where they suffer a loss in control. Undercover Camaros are where things get spiced up.
I hated these. They were so hard to track or to see that you would just drive there and they would just spawn when you were in them and immediately start the chase. There was no chance to do anything about it.
They aren't visible on the minimap and can summon roadblocks and spike strips. F-150s are deployed at the highest heat level. They're strong, quick off-road, and deal lots of damage. They don't have too many weaknesses, but that's passable for the enemy type that spawns at the highest heat level because they're meant to be a challenge. And then there's...
Yeah, but they were way more than a challenge with your B and A tier and A plus tier cars. That's the whole problem that I'm having. Sure, I was playing on the hardest difficulty, and you know, I have more aggressive and intelligent cops, and I have 60% of the health I would usually have. Maybe on medium difficulty, it will be easier, or probably way easier if I'm at 100. Like, if I play this now on medium difficulty and I have 40% more health, that would probably be a blessing. And if they're not as aggressive as they were, I would probably get away way earlier. But like, that's not how I wanted to play it.
Their faults. The main issue being that they are easy. Like, way too easy. Any small hit or scrape with them at even the most modest of speeds renders them immobilized.
Yeah. But if you are in a cop chase like this one, that doesn't work anymore. These cars, you can never take them out. Ever.
In addition, they often hesitate to make any aggressive maneuvers. The aforementioned Corvettes exhibit a tendency to
if they would constantly crash into you, you would never be able to play this at Heat 5. Never ever. On hard mode, Heat 5 would just be impossible. And those gas stations would leave you. They would be useless with these 4-minute cooldowns. They were already kinda useless in and during those chases, because you could use them once at best.
Simply drive next to you, as opposed to taking any aggressive maneuvers. The other police cars never try to slam into you or box you in the few times you'll end up in a precarious situation, which entirely excises the tension found within these chases. Evading their regular moves even are a trivial task. Just steer in a general direction away from them and you're golden. They might even wreck themselves too. This results in the police hardly having any presence within races. In the older games, this would be called a hot pursuit. In Unbound, I call it a cold pursuit. If the race does attract police attention, the cops are so slow.
I mean, I want to disagree a lot with him on this point, but realistically, he probably just hasn't played it on the really hard difficulty and just on medium. And I can believe that it's like he said. I bet for me, if I turn this game on now and I played on medium, it would be very easy for me, especially since I'm used to the hard difficulty, but probably also in general.
That you won't even realize that they're chasing you until that dreaded cop chase remaining text appears on your screen after you finish it. Because
That's
the police
true.
are so easy to evade and crash out, escaping them becomes comically easy. Well, that's what I would say if it weren't for the police helicopters that appear after heat level 4. I'll speak
The helicopters? Hey, doggo. The helicopters weren't as big of a problem for me. Like, realistically for me, it wasn't bothering me
about
that
this
much.
game's risk and reward in a bit, but know that heat levels increase at a rather fast pace. Basically, after 3 races at night, you'll be at heat level 4 or 5, and chased by those helicopters. Because the cop cars are so easy to wreck, you'll often end up destroying all of them and remain in a pursuit consisting of 1 or 2 helicopters, which do nothing to stop you but will remain hot on your trail until you park your car and hide. If you're not found by the helicopter, however, you will be caught by one of the million cop cars that patrol the streets after you escape the chase. Out of all the words that came to my mind while trying to sneak my way past the legion of cop cars on every single road, stealth mission was the one that I thought of most. That's not a good sign.
That was also bad. Like, it was so many cop cars. It was generally so many that you actually couldn't just use the regular road at all. And that's bad in a racing game.
The issue doesn't lie within escaping the cops. It's that escaping them is easy, but staying hidden is difficult. It results in a game where you will constantly be forced into boring police chases that last far longer than is tolerable. In Rivals and Heat, you were terrified of getting in a police chase because they were dangerous. In Unbound, you're scared of wasting another 5 minutes of your life pointlessly running away from them. Risk and reward, as a result, has also undergone a considerable downgrade from Heat. But to properly discuss where Unbound falters, we need to take a brief look look at Heat. Calm and benign police during the day that turn rogue and aggressive at night. Make money during the day, but the real party starts when the sun goes down. Because rep was tied to player progression and by extension cars and upgrades, you were incentivized to earn as much as possible. At night, your Heat level is at scale with your rep multiplier, which is increased by doing more races.
Yeah,
Heat level 5
right
can
here.
earn you tons of it, with the catch being its high
was
police
so
response.
cool.
If you choked and got busted before making it to a safe house, you lost all of that rep. Your hard work was gone. In Unbound, this has been substantially trivial.
But it also didn't cost me money, which in Unbound, okay, it's cooler in the fact that it means more to get caught or not. But the getting caught part is so bad. And like, it just felt so worse that I actually just didn't want to have that.
Firstly, the time of day doesn't make a difference in police aggression. The LSPD chases you with the same ferocity at night as they do during the day. Secondly, heat levels rise too quickly. After 3 or so events, you'll be at heat level 5. The game acts like it'll be a challenge, but it isn't. It's tedious avoiding the police, sure, but after a few minutes, you'll drive to the next race. That tension, that questioning of whether or not your car and your nerve can tolerate another race was what made Heat so captivating. Do you risk it all in the hopes of earning more, or do you end your run now while you're ahead? Because that tension is eliminated, so is the risk, meaning that instead of risk and reward, it's just reward. The game is broken. Why shouldn't you complete every race available to you? You do want money, right? You never run away to a hideout out of fear of losing all your money in Unbound. You keep going because the chances of you losing any of it are nigh impossible. Impossible if you quit the game right before getting busted. As an added bonus, you're conveniently spawned in front of a repair shop. Heat got an A. Unbound didn't read the directions. Unbound has a revenge story. You know this because your car was stolen and because your goal is to get it back. Is it a good story? Yes. Great? No. But for a game with this much emphasis on its story, anything less than great is below my expectations. Unbound has a tone problem. Its plot is about taking your car back from Yaz. Its theme is anger and vengeance.
Yeah, but that is such, it's made so bad in ass. I'm not even giving the concept is good at best for the story, but like almost every aspect of it is just not well done. Like, I don't hear it, bro. I don't see it.
You're angry at Yaz. Completely unrelated, but next to everyone also makes corny jokes every time they open their mouths. Trying to focus on your goal of winning the grand is next to impossible, with Tess constantly talking your ear off about food and Rydell forgetting to say Need for Speed. It wants you to be angry, but it also wants you to laugh at every dialogue line. Of course, none of this is to say that Unbound's story is bad, because it's not by a long shot. When you witness Rydell watch all of his cars race away from his garage in a single fell swoop,
the literal intro of the story is good to some degree, but then now I remember, bro, she had zero reason to dislike Rydell. Zero. There was no reason for it. It was diabolical that she was a part of that. And her afterwards saying, yeah, no, actually I wasn't a part of that. I didn't know Alec was gonna do it. Yeah, well, you probably did, you know. And then at the end, you weren't like, Alec, that's not cool that you are betraying my foster father and my friend and the place that I'm working at. The guy said, yo, get in the car, and you just got into the car and drove away with my car. Like, I don't see any world where 2 years after you would sympathize with that. And this whole, I know it's been 2 years and I should have said something earlier. Well, no shit, bro. Like, even saying something wouldn't have done anything. The fact that she came there, saw that, and apparently didn't want all these things to happen with the getting, you know, him getting everything stolen and blah blah blah. She went into Alec's cars and listened to him and got away. You know, she was part of that whole thing. And I don't see why we have not called the police over that. How is Rydell still alive, bro? He should be up with lawsuits this high up, bro, because his customer cars were stolen. And they're aware of that people are pissed, because when we have this time jump 2 years later into the present, his mechanic shop is dead, bro. There's a rat or a possum or whatnot. Nobody's in there. Our main character, we as main character, have nothing to do, and we wonder about these weird books Rydel's getting until we pick up Tess and we get funded by like 40 grand to have a race car to make an advertisement for ourselves and the Rydel's shop.
Betrayed by someone he raised, you feel genuinely sorry for him. He did nothing wrong but lost not only his cars, but also part of
he did. He also did nothing wrong to piss Jess that much off that she would feel good about doing that.
his family, and so did you. He didn't deserve this, and that makes you upset. You want to take down Yaz for what she did, possibly more so than you want your old car back.
I want both. But then
This game's heart.
But then we get into the first week of the race with Tess or her announcement, and it doesn't mean anything. We just see him be like, oh well, oh, is that my car? Hey, that's my car, Tess. He stole it from me and it's standing right in front of me, and instead of just stealing it back, I can do nothing. And well, I want to talk, but then I'm like, oh well, yeah, I can wait. No, bro, this is just completely out of touch. This is zero realism.
Heartfelt ending will genuinely make an impact on you. Yaz finally growing up and understanding her mistake, finding it in her to say sorry, and finally reuniting with her family.
You know, actually, she doesn't say sorry. She comes and she's like, I want to talk, and then she does the stupid joke, and but like she never actually said sorry. Come on, get it.
Family gives a cozy feeling never.
That is just the dumbest shit ever, bro. There should be an option where we choose if we fix the game with Tess and get a lot of money, or if we actually do what the ending is, or if we have the chance to be like, no, yes, I'm gonna drive against you, and I'm not going to lose this for Tess. I'm gonna win the car and win my money, and that's that. That's
before
what
seen
probably
in the
should be.
racing genre. My problem isn't that this game's story is bad or poorly written, it's that it's pointless. Every time you leave the garage, you're reminded that this game is about revenge. It's hammered into your head through phone calls and garage dialogue. It's the entire point of the game. It's why you turned to street racing in the first place. You're on a mission to win your old car back from Yaz, which is why I was all the more confused when I saw that the main character ends up forgiving Yaz. No, really, she decides to reconcile with you in, I kid you not, the last 75% of the game. And at the end, she does. She becomes your friend as quickly as she became your enemy. And why did she become our enemy in the first place? Because she was scared of how Rydell would act when the cars were stolen by people she didn't know.
Come on!
Alec was also hinted to be an.
She knew those people, though. They knew, yes. She knew them, and she got in the car with them and drove away with our car. How? Like, are you kidding me?
Ominous puppet master, supposedly pulling the strings of the street racing scene from behind closed curtains, yet never makes any appearances in the game, and is only casually mentioned in conversations.
That also made no sense. This whole Alec guy is just, you know, the Mandela effect or something.
In the end, he was the one to blame for Yaz's betrayal. For all intents and purposes, he's the true antagonist of Unbound, yet he never shows up on screen for his own downfall. But hey, at least we get to meet ASAP Rocky. You know, the guy on the cover, who also appears for a grand total of 2 missions. Sorry, 3 if you count his voice lines in the takeover events. One of which is a duel in which
That the thing that he is in there and there's a car of him in there, and the whole idea is really good. I'm just gonna say. I probably have heard songs of A$AP Rocky. I cannot tell you one single song of him. I'm not his biggest fan. But you know, I've heard the name, and it's pretty cool that he's in there, and it's pretty cool that he's like an actual appearance in the game, and he's talking in the game and interacting with you. The whole monologue in this one story that we have with him is absolutely ass, bro. it's just like the political ads that we had. It was such a pointless yapping session. But okay. What was cool on the other hand was that he was racing the games with us and we could bet with him and he would make comments about it. That was really cool. That was W. Big W's.
He doesn't say anything. The other an interview that was horribly cut into the game. The conversation awkwardly shifts to ASAP Rocky's motivations and what drives him. His dialogue, while interesting, fails in its attempt to bring anything relevant to the game's theme. He doesn't talk about Lakeshore's street racing scene or give your character any advice on how to deal with Yaz's apology. He's just being...
Especially when the story, when the story mission is done with him, catch back and you're like, we as a character say, hey man, it was great talking to you and was so interesting. And then he ends with, yeah, I felt the same. It was so interesting talking to you. Bro, you were only talking. I was asking 5 questions and that was it. I was not talking with you. You were talking to me and I was listening.
Interview, and then he never talks to your character again. I mean, he does appear in the races after this encounter, and he does have a line saying that you have cheat codes, but that's about all he has to do with this game. ASAP Rocky's performance comes across more as a cameo than it does a collaboration. Unbound,
I think it's right in between. I feel like it could have been a little bit more, but it wasn't simply just a cameo. It was way more than just a cameo.
Is one of, if not the longest game in the franchise, and does very little to justify its runtime. The game follows a day and night system. To beat Yaz, you're required to prepare your garage in order to compete in the weekly qualifier.
The whole thing with weekly thing and a actual Monday to Sunday schedule, don't do it again. You know, just have it be the next day when you get into a garage. Alright? And just don't have time to do anything. You know, when you did all the races, you can have the big race and then you're like qualified to compete in the one, and then you have to buy in, and then that's fine.
This is where the week system comes in. Go through 6 days worth of racing in both day and night to earn enough money to afford the qualifier's buy-in and upgrades for your car. This system is problematic for a plethora of reasons. Firstly, it's repetitive, but not in the way you might think. Sure, doing races back to back for hours on end might sound grating, but it's the lack of event variety that makes this truly irritating. It's limited, agonizingly so. You'll end up noticing it in the first week of the game, and by the second, it'll become
That's also boring because the races itself is like, okay, but then we also talked about it. It's not so many different races and they return constantly. Then for me personally, I just didn't get warm with the drifting at all. So I didn't do the drift events because I paid a buy-in and I just failed. And then the takedown events, I also wasn't great with them. And they just were in front. There was like speed cross in the in heat and I think in payback, where you like drive against stuff and it explodes and whatnot, and that was really cool and it was fun to do. The takedown events here, they were not fun for me. It's just driving and hitting stuff and nothing more. It's nothing special. Do nothing. You do 3 laps of that. And you need to get a multiplier. It's hard to get multipliers. Like it was for me. It wasn't that easy to do. So I also didn't do it because it had a buy-in.
Given how little Unbound does in the way of presenting its risk factor,
not even drag races.
You will play through every event and it will grow annoying. Headliner, Big City Life, the OG, they will all become intimately familiar to you, and this level of repetition will not feel intentional. The game feels like it's trying to hide its shallow pool of events by relegating them to separate race types. Corner King, speed races, street races.
The fact that Corner King is not a drift event, but the drift event sounds like something that is not drift at all.
Do very little to feel different enough to justify an entirely different event category. Delivery missions and takeovers are fun and great ways to deviate from the norm.
Takeovers were not fun. The delivery missions were fun. The daytime ones and the nighttime ones, both of them. And the idea that you get to race different cars, even cars you wouldn't buy and cars you couldn't afford, at that point in the story, or just because they were that good. Really cool, really appreciate that.
But they aren't fun enough to divert your attention from the fact that there aren't that many races. You will learn to speedrun Unbound, not organically live in its street scene, and by the time you roll credits, you'll be burnt out of its shallow gameplay variety. Secondly, it's pointless. For each qualifier, you're required to earn enough cash in order to afford this week's qualifiers buy-in. The problem with this system is that you'll have both a heavily upgraded car and all the money you need by the end of the second day of the week, which makes the rest of that week completely pointless and boring. You can't just skip to the qualifier, you're forced to do at least a single race each day before advancing to the next. And so you race, and you will grow to hate it. Of course, it would be impossible to wrap up this review on Unbound without at least taking a glance at its online mode, which from the perspective of an outsider looking in, seems to be getting significantly better.
Is now vibing with us.
Yo, thank you very much for the follow, Freya Juliet. Welcome in. Currently watching reviews and thoughts on Need for Speed Unbound after we have just finished it 2 days ago. Was it yesterday? No, it was 2 days ago. And yeah, welcome in. Hi. Hope you're having a good day.
Wealth of new cars, new game modes, and new ways to shake up the monotony. And credit where credit is due, it's fun. It makes many great strides in breaking up the single player's monotony. Drift and drag events, I like them. I might be a little biased here given that my username is literally Dr. Powerslide, but drift events are very much enjoyable. It's an almost meditative experience trying to get your car to perfectly align with the track's curvature for maximum point gain. The new Drift Pro tires make this ever so enjoyable. They're extremely low grip, forcing you to optimally angle your drift. Drag events are a callback to Underground, with you being challenged to switch lanes alongside shifting. Overall, Unbound Online is fun. A lot of it even. I enjoyed it, and so will you. The modes are well crafted and will genuinely feel like they were made by people passionate about the game. However, and I do not use that word lightly, Lakeshore Online comes with many catches. Close to every single car from the single player is now locked behind random, seemingly unrelated challenges. You cannot purchase them without completing its arbitrary set of tasks. All of the new content is also exclusive to the online mode. It doesn't matter how far you got in the story mode, the only way to access this new content is through an entirely different game mode, which in of itself is an asinine decision, and it's understandable why people would not want to switch to a completely different mode to enjoy the new content. But that's not the only catch. If you want to drive Unbound's new cars like the S650 Mustang and M3 G81 Touring, you are required to trudge through yet another battle pass, and not a free one at that. $10 USD is what is required to buy its premium version. Players are not only required to spend that money to be eligible to earn new content, but are also forced to grind endlessly for it. And once you earn the car, you are then required to grind even more if you want access to all of its body kits.
I don't like being forced to play online, because for a racing game, I just don't like online modes. Like I just strictly prefer story mode, so offline. I don't see the I don't have any interest in doing this online. Like, not at all. For me, it makes fun to be offline in those games.
This method of monetization is absurd, and the community is right to question it. Fear not, however, for if you missed the volume, you can buy access to the previous one's content for another hefty $10. $10 USD for some cosmetics and a few body kits. Maybe a car if you're lucky. That's not even absurd anymore, it's exorbitant. And while we're in the store page, we find quite possibly the worst deal I've seen throughout my entire gaming history. $15 USD for, get this, a cosmetic pack. All three of these packs total out at $45. What do they do? Cure cancer? Content from previous games has also been cut out in order to be implemented later on as DLC. The Audi R8 and S5 were not present at launch due to licensing problems, but were added later on as those rights were acquired. Rather than quietly adding them into the game, EA inexplicably decided to sell them as DLC. $3 USD is what they deem an acceptable price for cars that were present in Heat, one of which was in Payback from 2017. It's so cartoonishly overpriced that it makes literally anything else look like a steal. The game modes and gameplay variety are fun, and will keep you entertained for a considerable amount of time, but the way it's monetized is beyond egregious. It's flat out silly to the fullest extent of the word. I enjoyed this mode, and you probably will too, but I can't in good conscience recommend that anyone buy these microtransactions. I didn't hate Need for Speed Unbound. I might criticize it, but this game did many things fantastically. Unbound is genuinely one of the best.
There's never a reason to buy microtransactions. Never. Never ever in a racing game should you have the need to get them. Not even in Payback
Need
were
for
they
Speeds
needed.
of the modern era. Its core racing experience arguably the most fun the franchise has ever been, though its flaws were what held it back from being the
I wouldn't
best. The
say
absence
that.
of its street racing scene, the weakness of the cops, and the dull
I
car
would
list
not
all
say
hampered the
that.
joy Unbound had to offer of keeping you on guard for the duration of every race you found yourself in. It's a good time, just not a great one. Enjoy it, but don't forget its flaws. And don't you forget what it deserved to be. Thank you for
Solid review.
Set in the Chicago-inspired lake.
Now we have the big one. White Lights Need for Speed Unbound review. This guy, I said it in the last episode, I really value his opinions. We even watched him talk about every Need for Speed game from 2011 until Need for Speed 2015. And we watched, at least, I know we watched the Payback video he did as well when we played Payback on stream 2 years ago. He has great thoughts. He sees things in games, and he has like a very structured way of doing these reviews, especially for Need for Speed, because he has done so many. And he just really has a good way with words. It's really great. So I'm getting myself a water, and then we're gonna get into it.
Set in the Chicago-inspired lakeshore city, stylized with cel shading, and begun with the betrayal of your best friend Jasmine, who took the car you worked on for months and ruined your adoptive father Rydell. Need for Speed Unbound is a game about working up through 4 weeks of 3 qualifiers to win the biggest street race in Lakeshore and take your car back from Yaz. It's fun, by which I mean it's mostly made of driving, and the driving is fun. One of Unbound's best ideas is Burst Nitrous. It's a second, yellow gauge that obeys different rules and thus encourages different responses from the first. For one, it's a burst. That will soon become important. For another, it's staggered. There are 3 bars and a bar must be filled completely to use it, which encourages you to get that one more near miss or to drag out your drafts and drifts just a little longer. Burst Nitrous is also temporary. If you don't use it when you have it, it will quickly disappear, and what that does is encourage you to keep up the combo or to take a risk. You can't always wait for the ideal place with Burst Nitrous. If you're in a precarious situation, there's a risk reward. Do I shoot ahead but risk losing control, or do I play it safe? It's effective and thrilling, and thrill is why you're playing a game like this. Sense of speed has undergone a considerable improvement for Unbound. The newfound richness and granularity of detail in the world itself better quantifies the speed at which you're passing it. Motion blur is effective and aggressive, streaks appear at the highest speeds, wind whips in tunnels, but it's the ever-controversial anime visual effects that truly make the difference here, rather than something as meaningless as a static effect. Unbound's effects only exist when they can emphasize the coolness of a moment or the motion of the car. Smoke bellows when when rubber burns, wings flash in mid-air, light begins to trail when you cross 100 miles per hour, but their most enthusiastic response is to burst nitrous. Energy sparks around the body when it's charged,
Yeah,
before an
I saw
explosion
that
of
also.
color hurls you into a short-lived overdrive. You're not even going that much faster with the full 3-bar charge, but you certainly feel like you are. Unbound's visual effects intrude on nothing, and succeed completely in their attempt to make what Need for Speed is good at better. The thrill and excitement of driving dangerously. As it was in Heat, cars handle well enough at any speed. They've got the weight, they're responsive, and they more or less react to their environments convincingly. The G-forces and grip turns are clearly felt, and drifting, for the average player's purposes, feels smooth enough. But it's the high speeds that keep you coming back. It's here, in the hundreds, that you're placed at the edge of control, where your car remains stable, but there's the sense, the fear, that you're one mistake away from ending up in a Netflix disaster documentary, or losing a position. It's where a carefully balanced density of oncoming traffic keeps you mechanically engaged, constantly, no matter how straight or how long the road, and tense in equal measure. This is the thrill that only Need for Speed can provide in the modern racing scene. It's the best thing about Unbound, and it's also, basically, unfair. Traffic isn't fair, it's unpredictable, you can't avoid it every time, and even when you could, the fact that you had to whilst another racer did not, is a fundamental inequality. You will be wrecked in this game, and it will be bullshit, and that won't be a rare occurrence. This is the price we pay for the street racing thrill. It's a problem fundamental to these games, and for some, it will continue to be too much to tolerate. For most, it's a price worth paying. Well, usually, we'll get to that. For now, I want to talk about the most important effect of burst nitrous, its effect on balance. For a very long time, grip turns in Need for Speed have not been competitively viable, but you didn't need to be a hardcore player to know that. Grip turning is harder than drift. You need to employ the brakes, judge distances, and turn in at the right time. Why would the casual player bother when they're entirely comfortable making effective drifts for a fraction of the effort? Unbound changed things by rewarding grip turns with burst nitrous. A lot of burst nitrous, and a lot more than drift. A decent grip turn will net you a full charge, and the moment I recognized that, I began experimenting with a form of handling that had been largely ignored, unknowingly, for so many entries before, and I loved it. It's nice to have a new form of challenge when cornering in Need for Speed. So is the variation. Now playstyle would change from car to car, and even from corner to corner if your car could reasonably handle both. If it can do both, then there's even a touch of depth in the choice. Which is best for this turn, grip or drift? But if there's anything I love about it, it's how it feels. Like pulling back a bowstring, then letting it fly. So,
Yeah.
the going fast is good and the turning is good. That's really good. But there's more. This is a game that gets the racing right. Track splits are a welcome return, bringing a sense of dynamism and life to the race.
Yeah,
And bringing in moments
those were
an
also
interesting
cool.
decision
I
too.
forgot
On the
to
docks,
mention
for
that.
instance, if I was feeling confident enough to execute an extended grip turn, I would choose the higher path, and the full tank of burst nitrous would outcompete the easier straight below. You can also customize your car to reward more burst nitrous for specific behaviors, which may then influence what splits you pick. The one with more corners, the one with a jump, or the one where other racers are, if you've got the drafting upgrade. Race rewards are another win. In a creative middle ground between Horizon 4's placement doesn't matter and Horizon 5's only first place matters, you will lose money in Unbound for placing poorly, but good positions are all rewarded well. There is incentive for strong performance, and yet there is comfort with not getting the ideal result, and so the game keeps moving, not getting bogged down in repetitive.
What I also really liked is that there were races. The races all had a different payout split. Like this race, for example, you would only get you would get a lot of money, but only if you finish first. Then there was games that had money for the first 3 places, and there was money for like every single place because there were free entry, and then there were like the ones where only like 6, 7, 8 out of 8 doesn't get money. And then it was way more balanced, like being 1 place above somebody wasn't a lot. So I really liked that because it was like, do I really have to play for a win, or can I be happy with 4th place? I really like that. That was really cool. Because usually I like those races more, especially like from the older Need for Speed games. I know that you have to win. If you don't win, you're cooked. And if you don't win, you have to restart. I like that a lot because for me it helps me get better at the game because I drive more and I drive to win. And then I win and I get the reward and I win. That's cool in itself. I like that you can be fine with only being 3rd place, sometimes 2nd place, 4th place, as long as you get money. that's good. And it's okay because also you have the limited restarts, and I played on hard mode, so I had 2 restarts only. Sometimes I didn't have any, and sometimes only had 1. I don't know how that happened or worked. I've yet to find the solution for that. But yeah, that's something that happened, and that meant that if I was, sometimes it meant that I got second place and I wanted to get first place, and I was like, I feel confident getting first place. And then the next race, I would get hit by a cop car or something, and then I would be out, and I had to restart because I obviously wouldn't win it anymore. And then again, something would happen, or I would not have a good start, or there was rubber banding in the first place, and I just wouldn't get it. And then my chance to get a good placement was over. And that I don't like, especially if it's that limited. And it's so random if I do well or not. A car appearing in front of me and just making me crash and have this crash camera thing, and I lose the car and I have 2 seconds lost, and everybody takes over you.
Of perfectionism.
You can't
But what
come
I
back.
found particularly impressive was that I always believed that the ideal result was attainable. The chaos of Lakeshore's streets is just as much a danger for your enemies as it is for you, and the driving AI is just as capable of making mistakes. I was convinced that I could outdrive a power differential between me and a better car ahead, and I believed
No.
that I could recover some, if not
It was not possible on hard mode. That did not happen. If the car was better, you were cooked. Even if I had the best car, I would get cooked sometimes. Up until S+.
most, if not all, of the positions I lost from one of my own failures, and my faith was often rewarded. Things don't feel set in stone in Unbound in the way they do in Horizon. The sense of competition never dies, and that's big. Adding to this is the successful implementation of car combat. The driving model handles fishtailing and pushing enemies into obstacles intuitively, but not whilst making it easy. So, if a rival is pissing you off or you consider them a threat, then for a cost in speed. And
Yeah, if I did that in hard mode, I would do that, and this guy would overtake me, this guy would still be behind me, and this guy would be 100 meters behind me. That would not pay out for me. I would be completely cooked if I did that, and I would be really slow, and until I get to my top speed again, there will be even 5th place close to me.
a risk of screwing yourself, you can take them out. Though not the most important, perhaps the most interesting success of Unbound's enemies is that they are fleshed out in the literal sense. They have bodies, faces, and personalities to match their names, which is great, because that makes it much easier to hate them. Other people. Am I right, fellas? When an irritating little shitweed passes you, that stings in a way a mere name would not, and Criterion do their best to play it up. They'll taunt you, they'll threaten you, they'll hit you, and then comment on hitting you. They're cocky, and that makes you want to take risks to relieve them of their cock. So it's a good thing that contact is something the physics have.
This Chase guy in his Porsche, he was a terrorist, bro. This guy would crash into me so often, and he would not crash into me just by, accident somehow get into me. He would I would be on the road going like that, and he would come from here somehow and just fly into me. I had that happen 3 times. Chase, he was the terrorist of Need for Speed, bro. He was wild, bro. He was the most obvious 3rd or 4th place ever in any race given. And he would have so many crashes, it was crazy.
Handles well.
Into
Humanity
me.
introduces a never-before-seen layer of that contact is something the physics
He
handle as
would
well.
crash, bro.
Humanity
Look at this
introduces
guy.
a never-before-seen layer of narrative stakes into races. By making things personal, it makes things tenser, and in a simpler but critical way, it fulfills the juvenile competitive
Chase,
fantasy
bro.
of street racing. You're supposed to butt heads. Criterion does not make enough of an effort to stop the same lines repeating in a short space of time. Neither are there enough lines in total for the fastest rivals who are like
Not enough lines repeating in those races, yes. But if you had to repeat anything in the story, it would be the exact same thing always. Having to repeat a Friday, I think he probably didn't have that because he played not on hard difficulty. But you would hear every single fucking dialogue every single time. And if Rydell had a pickup job for you and you didn't do it first time he proposed it to you, he would repeat it 3 to 7 times to you. always the same cringe ass jokes and the contentless speech he would give.
Likely to interact
As
with
the
most
same.
often, like Lyric and Medusa. And it's disappointing a rival can open their heart or explicitly offer friendship in their side mission, but return to status quo dialogue in the races. The impression of humanity does fade with time, but never enough to put more than a dent in their success. Compounding on what works is the side bet system, which allows you to challenge specific races as an aside to the race payout. The better their car is than your
Bro, 11 grand taken away from ASAP Rocky, bro. See that? See, that's what I said. Justicia is in every single race class. She's top in B tier with a 159 car, and she is an S plus with the exact same car in 336 rating. That doesn't even make sense. Chase is also almost in everything. These guys, they're in the top leagues, but they're also in S class.
car, the more money you stand to gain, and it is a glorious feeling, not only to take the money of someone you dislike, but also to flex on the entire crew by challenging the top dog and winning. I hate all of these bastards, and I might need to seek psychiatric help, but it's a testament to the success of Unbound's rivals that I might need to seek
Del Rey
psychiatric
Buck.
help, but it's...
Why was she in a Jeep, bro? Racing. Like, gee, that's the least race car ever, bro.
It's a testament to the success of Unbound's rivals that I realize that. When it's dodgy bastards trying to take my money online, however, it's not therapy I need, it's something far simpler,
One moment, bro.
infamous niggas.
Alright guys, we're back. Sorry, the Frank call. We're gonna play Fortnite in a bit. So
Cheaper
Boom.
and far less time
Oh, we're gonna
consuming
finish that.
than NordVPN. Imagine being stuck with the
Alright.
HBO Max on a hide from IP where Hot's Linux birthday continuously engaging. So, the racing in Unbound is fast, thrilling, and continuously engaging. It's flawed, but it's better than Heat, and I'd take it in a
Oh, did he not like Heat? I liked Heat so much.
heartbeat over the competition. So now it's time to talk about what's wrong with it. Let's start with the crash physics. The punishment for crashing in Unbound is light. You respawn quickly, you're respawned at speed, and you're respawned a fair distance.
No, not always. And you sometimes spawn right in front where you crashed in. So you just crash into it again, or you have to go around and then you can hit the gas.
Ahead of the crash site. Crash detection is also very sensitive and Unbound. It doesn't need to be that big a knock to end up on your roof.
Yeah.
But if the punishment is light, why does it have to be sensitive? In the case of a glancing blow or a side-on collision with the environment, why not simply punish my health bar and my speed, and avoid the crash altogether? Crash cams arrest control for several seconds and puncture the momentum of the race.
Exactly
it's a
what I'm
frustrating
saying.
interruption when it feels needless, and it often does. But much worse is the frustration of certain crashes whose validity you will be right to question, because because crash detection is simply unfinished. At first, the problem seems to be far too much importance placed on the speed of the contact and far too little placed on angle. It is not what you would expect that trading paint is an instant death, but a head-on collision barely scratches my health bar, even though it's slower. But then something stranger happens. Another head-on collision does instantly kill me, and I survive a significantly faster sideways impact unharmed. It adds significantly to the confusion that the car is forced to flip for the crash cam even if it makes no physical sense. You'll usually die to the big crashes and survive the smaller ones, just as you'd expect. It's the too many times that you're killed by something that prior evidence suggests you shouldn't have been that frustrate me, especially so in a game that is already on thin ice when it comes to my tolerance for bullshit, especially so in a game that limits your restarts. This is part of the design philosophy to emphasize consequence.
PS3.
And it is another way to discourage the player from endlessly repeating the same event with a first or nothing mindset at the cost of their own enjoyment. It's the fear of running out of restarts that successfully meets these ends. What happens if you do run out of restarts, however, can fuck off, because the kind of thing that would make you want to restart might not be your fault, and that could cost you 30 minutes of your life.
That's also what I'm saying. The reason I have to restart is more often than not things out of my control.
These rare but unforgettable flares of frustration, Unbound goes far beyond tolerating. Here's a story. In the weekend qualifiers, you have to come first. If you run out of restarts, the game forces you to reset from Friday morning, completely erasing your progress.
Guys, we didn't have the money for the buy-in in the first 2 weeks, and we played even the third week, so we didn't have it, but like we did that on purpose. But we restarted Friday, I think like 5 times overall, and that was a lot to do. And if that would have happened to me, what he's just saying, I would have lost it.
Progress that day and night. You've lost over an hour of effort and progress. Would you like to see the reasons that happened to me? This is not the price we pay for the street racing thrill. This achieves nothing. Well, nothing but a psychotic break. Limited restarts were the wrong move. If the race's rewards began to diminish, starting from your second restart, the coronaries might have been avoided, and repetition still discouraged. Moving on to Burst Nitrous. There is one more thing to say about this mechanic, and that's that it makes the game much easier. Not just because you now have 2 nitrous bars, but because Burst Nitrous makes mistakes cost less. When you screw up, there is a period of time where you must accelerate back up to your old speed. During this time, slower drivers are catching up, and quicker drivers are widening the gap. That's the punishment of the mistake. With its burst of acceleration, Burst Nitrous targets this period specifically, and in doing so, reduces the consequence of error. Usually, small errors, especially things like not taking a corner in the ideal way. A bad drift entry can provide you with the Burst Nitrous you need to soften the consequence of the bad entry. And you want to know something cool? That's not the biggest way Burst Nitrous makes the game easier. A handy side effect to the burst is the way it essentially deletes unwanted momentum. If you're sliding too wide, it will remove the sideways motion, and that way a bad corner is saved. This is incredibly powerful, and so you might now think that Burst Nitrous is an easy and universal get out of jail free card, but it's not. This is still a game where every second matters. The good driver still wins, but its lowering of the bar is still immense. And what does that mean? Well, at times, it can mean falling asleep at the wheel. If you're in a good car and things aren't quick enough for traffic to be a concern, and the track isn't very demanding, and you're more than a week into the campaign so you're used to the driving physics by now, and you've got Burst Nitrous, which makes the only hard part.
The Lotus Evija, when we had that car and we just won the race, it was basically an autopilot. Only the endurance races and high-speed races on the highway tracks, this was tough for us because, you know, we were at 400, almost 400 miles an hour. And we were going fully at it, and it's really hard to dodge them. But even towards the end, we also got that kind of to work, so.
To this affair easier, there is the old race in the later weeks that is just a bit boring. What's good about Burst Nitrous reducing the consequence of error is that in doing so, it also reduces the cost of bullshit, and in making recovery easier, Burst Nitrous, as much as the AI or anything else, may be responsible for my frequently vindicated belief that I could usually come back from a bad situation. There is an upside here, an important one, but Burst Nitrous could have had this win without its most egregious property. Deleting momentum? That's where it crosses the line. It excuses bad play far more often than it softens the blow of bullshit, further weakening the experience of slower tracks in the later game, and allowing you to deal with what ought to be the toughest corners thoughtlessly. All you have to do for sharp turns at high speed is handbrake to turn 90 degrees and burst nitrous to delete the forward momentum. It's easy, it always works, and along with the driver's spine, it shatters the fantasy for things to work this way. Sharp corners should be the biggest challenge, not for any reason rooted in game design, but because arcade or not, in Need for Speed I want to feel like I'm driving a car-like thing, not a UFO, and on top of that, it feels wrong because it's cheap. The AI can't do it, but I can. I feel like I'm using hacks. And yet, in the end, what all these flaws amount to...
I mean, the AI is rubber banding and they barely ever get severely punished from a mistake. They crash into something 101, okay, but that happens so rarely for me.
Is nothing more than a dent in the strength of Unbound's core racing experience. So what about the campaign? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's something that wants to stop you from getting there. The Rozzers. What's the role of a police system? Well, for one, they create a dynamic challenge to mechanically engage yourself with when you're not involved with the game's scripted content. For another, they can create consequences to particular player actions, and this was their primary role in Need for Speed Heat, where at night, the game operated on a risk-reward dynamic. The more races you won, the better the rewards, but the stronger the police. If you were caught, you lost everything. You could bank your money and end the night. But you could also take the risk, try to survive the cops a little longer, and do one more race. Heat's police succeeded, in the sense that they were tough, and so successfully fulfilled their role as risk. Their failure was that they weren't especially fun to engage with in themselves. Enemy design was limited to a basic cop and a battering ram. Car combat wasn't viable, so your options were usually limited to driving very well and hoping for the best. In the end, most ended up abusing exploits. Enemy design was Heat's flaw, an Unbound success. You can no longer exploit them. Also, you can now beat them up, ram them, repeatedly smash them, push them into oncoming traffic. A few well-placed punts can put you into the cooldown state. It's a viable strategy, and in a pursuit, it means you've always got options. Another is rooted in the improvement to Unbound's cop AI. They make a far stronger attempt to predict where you're going, which makes it far easier to fake them out, to pretend you're going in one direction, then switch at the last moment. Tricking the cops is as effective in practice as destroying them, and by tapping into the fantasy of the skilled getaway driver, it's twice as cool. But what's especially interesting is the way different types of cop promote distinctly different responses. The Heat 3 Interceptor cannot be outrun, but their speed makes them easier to trick, and their street-focused build makes them weaker off-road. The mud, however, is the territory of the Heat 2 SUV. Their weakness is a lower top speed, so the best way to lose them is to get on the tarmac and leave them in the dust. Unfortunately, this is as far as Unbound's interesting enemy design goes. Undercover at Heat 4 and the Raptor at Heat 5 are distinct only in that they take more punishment and have no weaknesses. And maybe that's okay for the top dog, but for a cop called Undercover, it is a shame Criterion do so little to honor the concept. Don't expect civilian cars to suddenly leap out at you mid-pursuit, as you'd expect from a cop who is trying to blend in. It's just a matte black Camaro, which ironically couldn't look more like a cop if they tried. But hey, it's a small disappointment.
Yeah, but it's
Even
hard
if it's
to
only
discover.
two of them, comp types that mean a damn add successfully to what is, in terms of design, the best police there has been in a racing game for years. When was the last time you played against police where intelligent driving was a viable strategy, where the cinematic play worked, and the best thing to do wasn't to hold the accelerator for 5 minutes or to stop driving entirely? So what a shame it is that the context they inhabit, their role in the game, holds them so far back. This will not have a simple explanation, so where I think we need to start is with the basics on Unbound.
The system or the idea itself with the cops was good. I agree on that.
Campaign. In Unbound, you can't choose between day and night. It's day, then night. Heat carries over from day to night, and unlike most racing games, every day and every night will make different events available. Most of them will be repeats, some will be recommended to you, and of those recommended, only some will be worth doing. You'll quickly understand which by subtracting the buy-in, which is the price you pay to enter the event, from the payout, which is how much you stand to win. At day, there's usually 1 or 2. At night, maybe 2 or 3. That's the gist of it. Now, the police. In Unbound, escaping the police is actually quite easy. For the first few hours, you may project your experiences with the Palm City PD and assume that Heat 5 has every chance of ending you. But then, you wise up. The cops are fast, but they're not very aggressive. Taking them out is easy at these speeds. Even trading...
They are aggressive when they got you. When you have a fast car, it is, just like he said, the slow cars on hard difficulty are they're having a field day with you.
Paint will do the job, and with a few sudden route changes, you'll usually find yourself in the cooldown. It's not easy, but it's not hard, even at Heat 5, which means they don't create very much risk to the night's earnings, which doesn't initially sound like a very big deal, but it ends up leaving the game with its pants down. Firstly, because it pretty much obliterates the risk-reward decision process. There's no question of whether you should turn in for the
I would say on hard difficulty you have a risk and reward system.
night or keep going. You keep
Although a one that I didn't like too much.
going because there's very little chance you'll lose your money, and so doing all the events worth doing becomes normal. It's not recklessness, it's baseline play. And
But that's what it should be. You should be able to just do every race. You know, you're playing the game to race. I'm not playing the game to just pick one or two races.
as an immediate result, we lose the tension of risk. You still want to avoid the cops because you don't want to spend all that time escaping them if you're seen, but you know the stakes are nothing more than your time. The controller sweat tension from heat doesn't happen here, nor the incredible relief of making it back to a safe house. Now, as easy as it may be to escape the police, it can be surprisingly hard to avoid them. You can crash into them before they have a chance to detect you, you can speed past them to the same effect, and you can double the time you have to do this with the Undercover Racer auxiliary upgrade. You're not playing Metal Gear Solid, but even so, it's their spawns that make the difference. It's that there are so fucking many of them, that despite all the ways you have to avoid them, they're still harder to avoid than heat. They're everywhere. They've got helicopters. In fact, they spawn as if they were intended to punish a risk you deliberately took, not realizing that risk reward is broken and dead, and what they are actually punishing is baseline play. Hitting Heat 5 isn't a gamble, it's just the game, and so the police come across not as a consequence, but as pests, trying to make your usual nightly routine take as long as possible. What's especially annoying about this is that the journeys between events were already the least enjoyable part of the game. They're often very long to begin with, and it's not as if you get to take in the sights, because if you want to have an idea of where you're going, you'll need to be glancing incessantly at the minimap. Unbound isn't like Forza Horizon where the GPS route can be seen in-game, and you can reliably travel in a straight line. Lakeshore is filled with impassable obstacles, cliffs, rivers, walls. The GPS is not optional, so neither is your attention to the minimap, and what the cops do is make this 5 times worse. Cops.
What I also didn't like about the game is that, you know, every meetup was at least 1 or 2 minutes away from the nearest depot or safe house. There was never a safe house that was just right where the meetups are. In the whole city, there's no meetup. It's always all on the edge or around it. So anything in the map in the city, you had to drive there a long time. It was ass. And then you had those safe houses and the missions where I crashed out, where we were like in the bottom right, and we had to go here for a pickup, and then the safe house was here. Like, bro, we're not going there. I don't need the safe house here, bro. What is this bullshit? Nothing is here in the west part of the map. Also not in the northwest one. Here were like 3 safe houses, and there was no meetup. Here was a meetup. Here was a meetup. Here was a meetup. There was a safe house. There was a meetup. There was a Red El's home. There was a meetup. There was a meetup. Then it was there a safe house. Like, there was nothing, and
spawn constantly, and in many situations you will need to react immediately, so you can't afford to not be fixated on that tiny portion of the screen. They make a dull journey duller, and a long journey longer. Further frustrations include being trapped behind a slow-moving police car on a road with no exits, being sandwiched between police cars that make detection all but certain, and being subjected to the absurdities of Lakeshore's destructible objects when you're veering off-road whilst avoiding the police. Ignoring the fact that the game's idea of destruction is having the object evaporate, the principal issue is that the distinction can be unclear between the things that will shatter on contact and things that will break you. Given that these fences are destructible, is it immediately obvious to you that this fence would not be? Or this chain link fence covered in tarp here, when other chain link fences detonate? Given that most barriers are destructible, is it immediately obvious to you that this slightly taller barrier is not? It does this situation no favors that I could have been fooled into believing From Software designed the world with short concrete barriers cruelly hidden behind bushes and rocky cliffs that serve no purpose to the world design placed randomly throughout Lakeshore, and which you cannot always clearly see. It's one of my least favorite things about Unbound, and it's the cherry on top of the very shitty pie that is moving between events. It's dull at best and infuriating at worst, and it's not the end of this conversation. Because the police are ineffective threats, you'll usually be comfortable doing all the events that you want to do. You'll probably go for 1 or 2 a day because you want to get to the superior night events with low heat. You want low heat because the less time you spend at high heat, the less time you spend dealing with the police, and the quicker you make your money. Once you've finished all the night events with the massive payouts and you've hit
that's
heat
smart.
5,
We usually went to 3 or 4 heat, and then we had like 1 or 2 for the big night events. Then we would have a similar amount or just slightly more in the night,
which usually happen at around the same time, there's no reason to continue. Unlike the previous game, higher heat levels don't multiply payouts, and only events with average payouts remain, and you'll now have to do them whilst avoiding the Heat 5 police. So why continue? Answer: you won't. You'll do all the events you want to do and stop at a similar time most nights. This becomes a routine, and that routine becomes boring. What the game would have liked the answer to be is its calendar system. If each reset pushes you closer to the weekend qualifier, then you should want to make more money per night in time for the qualifier so that your car will be strong enough, right? Unfortunately, this fails too. You'll get your car up to the top of its class ready to dominate the weekend in a day's time, 2 or 3 at most, with average income. The pressure of the limited week is completely ineffective, and in the end, Unbound's notions of risk and limited time amount to little more than window dressing for a campaign structure that bears the repetitive characteristics of a 9-to-5 job more than the thrill-seeking life of a young street racer, whilst at the same time sacrificing absolutely every other good thing about Need for Speed Heat's approach to day and night. We've lost the simple fact of them feeling different from each other, where day was sanctioned and characterized as such with branding, barriers, screen.
That's like one thing that I would criticize the most about Unbound is what Heat did well, they made bad. They took the same idea, the same base, and they made it bad. They didn't keep what was good about Heat in Unbound.
In a post-race report, a night was illegal, with fans gathering on the tracks and races ending fluidly because you wouldn't want to stay in the same place for long. Day played calmly, like the average Need for Speed, while night operated on the risk-reward dynamic and thrilled with its tension, and we've lost the difference of what they rewarded. Day gave you money for purchases, and night gave you rep for unlocks. So depending on what you wanted or needed at the time, the experience of the campaign would change, adding to the game's variation and fighting against routine. Unbound's day and night, meanwhile, are identical in terms of fantasy and play. Their only important difference is that the rewards of day are worse, and so the only mechanical reason you play at day is because you're forced to. We've lost choice and change for nothing, and I'm not saying Unbound should have been the same as Heat, but it would have been nice if it wasn't so colossally worse. Still, the disadvantages of the design of Unbound's campaign continue. Because every day and night feature a different set of worthwhile events, much of the game's potential for variation depends on which events those are. Here's the thing, it's not random, it's Criterion's choice, so it does surprise me that the most obvious of mistakes are nonetheless made. Track variety, for instance, Tourist Trap and Inner City Circuit in B-Class, Power in A-Class, Smoke Show in S-Class, God Hour and Headspin in S+, feature 2 to 3 times in less than 1 week, whilst other tracks have yet to be introduced or have not been seen in a great deal of time. Similar tracks are likewise bunched up together, with most of week 1 set slap bang in the mid-city, and a similar failure of distribution affects event type. Drift events and takeovers succeed as variation, but fail as equal partners to genuine races, for the obvious reason that they feature a fraction of the depth and a fraction of the thrill. So why have 3 so closely together in week 1? And I was equally disappointed with the placement of high heat deliveries. These involve escaping, then avoiding the police on your way to a particular location. You'll only ever get them at night, which is probably not the best idea because at night, half of what you're already doing is escaping and avoiding the police on your way to a particular location. And so high heat deliveries feel like they're dragging things out more than mixing things up. They would have been far better placed at day. Throughout Unbound's 4-week campaign, and especially in the early game, I was regularly baffled at how needlessly and how often the game weakened itself by following the opposite of simple distribution logic. It's not as if there are a lot of event types in total to help this situation either. Drift events are takeovers but with no targets to smash. Head-to-head and half-pack are just races but with fewer rivals. Endurance races are races but long. It's only speed races that noticeably impact playstyle. Their focus on long highways favor a top speed build, and demand quick reflexes as traffic appears faster and faster. But that's the show. There is no off-road event, no event that tests grip over drift, no drag race. The police are usually...
One thing I also kind of do not like is that those drift and speed cross events, they had a lock on like what tier you do. Like it makes sense for the other races that they have one, but I mean, I'm not building 4 or 5 different drift cars compared to my usual race cars just to have 1 or 2 drift events every week. Doesn't make sense, does it?
Irrelevant in any event they join, the elimination mode is exclusive to the qualifiers, and there is nothing more inventive than these simplistic suggestions. Unbound just about gets away with its repetitive campaign, its dull open world, and its shattered risk-reward dynamic thanks to the steadfast success of its core gameplay. The driving and racing are fun. They hold back the tides of absurd and needless mediocrity, and in the end, Unbound is still a good time, but it is deflating to see so clearly how much better the game could have been. Let's now turn our eyes away from the mechanics and at last away from the minimap, to the actual world in which they're set. Take me down to the lakeshore city where the trees are green and the graphics are pretty. And they really are pretty. The step up from Heat is staggering. It is hard to see the cracks, in the rain or the reflections or the car models or the lighting, at any of Lakeshore's numerous...
Daytime looks better in Unbound than in Heat, but nighttime is just... Heat is so superior.
Times of day. Unbound's new makeup is a resounding success, and yet, not the best thing about the way it looks. It's the detail of Lakeshore that truly makes the difference. It's that this city makes none of the small concessions that we've come to expect from the racing genre. Nothing seems unfinished or unnaturally empty. Everything is filled with everything you'd expect to be there. From bins to lights, from flags to signs. There is graffiti. There is a freight train and the L train. There are birds in the sky. The shop faces are numerous and believable. And most of all, there are pedestrians, hundreds of them. You'll even see workers at work, believable. And most of all, there are pedestrians.
This is like what I mean. This is a race. There's 8 cars, all racing here. This is what, 220 kilometers an hour. These people...
Hundreds
should have no chance to dodge that. No chance. There's so many, like you see, there's so many cars driving here. These are dead people. This should be a 5 stars in GTA if you do this, because you run people over. Many. There's like a whole gang of us doing this. That's why I don't like it. It feels like a live city, yes, but like I don't think it makes too much sense.
Of them. You'll even see workers at work sites, and the difference this makes is staggering. Perhaps most of them.
Hey,
You'll even see workers at work.
How? There is no way a car flies over the ground towards you.
Work sites, and the difference.
Look at this. They are all dead. They are all getting hit. But just somehow they don't. Like, come on.
Is staggering, perhaps most clearly demonstrated by a return to Need for Speed Heat, where the deadness of a hot beach city not having people in it is immediately noticeable. Lakeshore is vivid, and a new standard for the realization of urban environments in racing games. It is a bit boring though, isn't it? Yes, of course, there had to be a caveat, and for Unbound, it's that Lakeshore is, well, a pretty unremarkable American city, lacking in both charm and character. Its forests are green, its city is grey, it's a lot of concrete and glass, and unlike gaming's last big-budget rendition of Chicago, none of that fits into a larger atmosphere. Watch Dogs was about the shadows, the silent evil behind the glass. The disturbed Aiden Pierce seemed sprung from its gutters and was at home in the rain. But Lakeshore feels at a disconnect. It's kinda just there. It's just the setting that was chosen, and its characteristics are only associated with the rest of the game in the vaguest possible terms. So instead of creating a vibe, Lakeshore simply reads as yet another unremarkable American city in an open-world video game. It's not moody, it's just raining. And the same type of disconnect applies to almost all of Unbound's artistic ideas. Now, Heat couldn't decide whether it was about social media-obsessed zoomers or 80s synthwave, so let's not put it on a pedestal. But it's clear enough that neon checkpoints and UI stylizations contributed to at least one of its art styles. Unbound's choice of colors, meanwhile, are washed-out green and washed-out orange. The UI and loading screens are mostly grey, and the visual effects, though pretty, feel no more fitting. Unbound would like you to believe it's street art, it's graffiti, but it just isn't. There are fleeting resemblances in moments, but most of the time they could be taken from any comic, sketchbook, or cel-shaded video game on the planet. It doesn't look street, or Chicago, or rebellious, or associated with cars. Video game on the planet.
Those gas stations, by the way, look so... they remind me so much of Heat because of the neon.
Street, or Chicago, or Rebellious are associated with cars. It just looks drawn. It doesn't clash with anything. It just doesn't connect with anything. And anything could have made it work. It could emerge from character, for instance. What if the protagonist was an artist who designs wraps for Rydell's rides? As it is, like Lakeshore, the visual effects are just there. Pretty but disparate. And I think this kind of disconnect even applies to the game's tone. Unbound seems to believe that the street scene is a place of risk and high tempers where winning is all that matters. It's a revenge plot, about getting your car back from a traitorous friend. It's also a story almost entirely composed of light-hearted jokes and chipper characters having chipper convos with a kind, likable protagonist who seemingly cares deeply for everyone in her life, even her rivals. What's the tone? Revenge? But no one's angry. Tense, but everyone's cool. When you run a
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said doesn't feel like it's for revenge. Like feels like we were so okay with doing that. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I can wait until next week. Oh, you don't?
vibe check on this game, there's no result. Unbound doesn't feel like anything. It's flat, and so difficult to love more than like. The biggest disconnect of them all, however, has nothing to do with art. It's the disconnect of the game's most fundamental narrative premises with what you actually experience, and how that affects immersion and fantasy. According to the story, Lakeshore is defined by its street scene. It has a history, a long one, there are factions within it, and the mayor has become personally obsessed with taking you down. And you know what? I never believed it once. Despite the mayor's legion of cops hunting a supposed street racing scourge in Lakeshore, you will never see a single street racer in Lakeshore, or a pursuit that you're not in, or a race that you're not in. Every meetup cutscene is shot in the same car park, and the fans no longer have a presence before or during races, all of which contributes to an impression of the street scene being small and insular. But nothing does that quite so severely as the rivals themselves. Their fleshed out realization makes the cracks more apparent, and what's apparent is that there's like 10 of them in the entire street scene. The roster hardly shifts over the 2-year gap from the prologue to week 1, and half the time it does, they're rotating the absent prologue racers back into the roster. Is this a street scene? Because it feels more like a secret book club. It's a small little thing, but the way races ended fluidly in Heat, with your rivals going their separate ways and the cops continuing their chases, did so much for the impression of truth to what street racing was in Palm City. Unbound separates the instances, which despawns rivals, and fails to maintain the continuity of where the cops were in the race, which makes it feel like racing and Lakeshore are separate, and that is the problem in a nutshell. There's no impression that the cultural, political, or social significance of street racing in Lakeshore is actually real, and that deals a noticeable blow to my immersion in the world, the fantasy of street racing within it, and my investment in 2 critical narrative goals: to stick it to the mayor, and to win the biggest street race in Lakeshore. Unbound's story will have to survive on the strength of its script alone, and that's worrying because stories in racing games tend to need all the help they can get. Is this one among them? Well, you wouldn't think so from the prologue. Things get off to a surprisingly strong start, with the protagonist and her best.
The start is actually so strong, and then nothing good gets out of it. It had its flaws, I already talked about it, but like, there was potential to make it really good and like something compelling. Like even the comeback could have been done a bit better. Like it could have been done good, but it wasn't.
Best friend Jasmine excitedly joining the Lakeshore street scene in a car they spent all summer building. 2 orphans who never had much are now finally making a mark on the world. This means everything.
It's such a good setup. And yes, turns on the guy who took her in and betrays her other friend. And then just says, yeah, it wasn't actually me, but I was part of it all. And
to them. Although he first urges caution, Rydell, their boss and father figure, was once a racer himself. It doesn't take long for the girls to get his blessing. You race, you win, you're finally alive, finally moving upwards. But as you do, the things weighing Yaz down feel ever more oppressive. You understand why, for this character at this time in her life, Rydell saying something as innocent as fix the client's cars properly would piss her off as much as it does. You understand the difficulty she has truly believing in any family figure.
I don't understand her being so upset about those small things, especially when she's talking to us about it, and we're like, yeah, don't take it so serious, he doesn't mean it like that. And he really doesn't. Like, I don't sympathize with that in any way. The second point he's about to bring in, maybe I do.
Would piss her off as much as it does. You understand the difficulty she has truly believing in any family figure, having been passed around like an unwanted burden her entire childhood.
Yes. That I can emphasize with. But then on the other hand, I don't think Rydell does anything to allow that. Like, if he was a bad person, if he was genuinely a mean person to her, that would be believable. And Need for Speed stories have like the perfect setting to be like, oh, bad guy bad, good girl gets bad experience, therefore gets bad, then is mean because other people were mean to her. We are good and think now mean girl is good because she was good, and then we turn her around to that. That totally works if you do it like that. But now it's like, we are good girl, Rydell is good guy. Yes, is good girl, but turns bad girl because of good guy. And then bad girl is still bad girl, and we are good girl and good guy. And then we have neutral girl Tess, and neutral girl is neutral girl, but is good to us. And who's mean? And then we have to feel for Yaz. Like, bro, there's nothing to feel about it. She made herself be mean. Like, nobody caused her to be mean. Like, definitely not the main character, us and Rydell.
She resents all her shackles, and she'll take any path forward. Alec, an old friend from the foster system, comes to Yaz with a
But we were on our own path forward with this car and us winning those races. Like, there was no need to do that. She was not put into a corner or something. If we would be struggling with money, if we would win no races, if we had a worse car or whatnot, that would make sense. But like, bro, we have a sick car, we have a fast car, we're winning races, going good. Like, what?
the delivery job. It doesn't seem right. It's a big risk and we don't know this guy, but she wants to take it. And with a well-executed build-up of tension, one unexplained absence after another, it becomes clear that something is wrong. And after worriedly returning to Rydell that the true target was him. Yaz didn't know they'd do this, but she should have known. Rydell told her not to fall in with these people, and when he loses it, reminding her that no one else would have taken her in, she makes a choice in the heat of the moment to commit to the betrayal, and then there's no turning back. Criterion have got the beginning they were going for, a betrayal that was never meant to be. For the duration of this prologue, I was taken aback. The characters have character and react believably to things. There's a plot, where things are set up and paid off. The protagonist is neither annoying nor silent. The performances are all strong. Sometimes
But we also defended Yes a little bit too much.
there's jokes, and they're not always bad.
And
There
I
are times
know I
in
was
organic,
pissed
the
about it.
dialogue is usually not. You're usually convinced
those two were
Rydell and
good.
Yaz could be real people. This is
Yeah.
big for a racing game. And now I'll tell you what's bad, because there had to be something. Because this wasn't great, but it was far too good to be true. Criterion portray a betrayal that was never meant to be, to set up the ending of reconciliation. Spoiler alert, Yaz comes back, and Rydell finds the strength to forgive her. It turns out, you guys, that belonging to a family was the life she truly needed. Aww. It's not the typical Need for Speed revenge story. The problem is, until the ending, it's still a revenge story. There is very little going on besides it, and no one, the protagonist nor the player, is particularly interested in getting
Nobody's-
revenge. The
yeah,
story has gone
nobody's
to
up
great
for
lengths to
revenge.
portray Jasmine as a redeemable character. She did make a mistake. She's not innocent, but she's a misguided 19-year-old girl who didn't intend for what happened to happen. And the protagonist and Rydell pretty much know that too. They'd like to beat her, but they certainly don't want to hurt her, often saying things
But I mean, if you're 19, I don't know. I would expect way more accountability from a 19-year-old. What she did was crazy. If she was a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, I would say, okay, it's a young teenager, not even an adult. But like 19. That doesn't sell to me.
Things like, I wish it hadn't come to this, it's all so unnecessary. That's the beating heart of Unbound's story. If the characters don't even want to win that badly, what's motivating me? Oh yes, she also nicked my wanky riced up Lambo Countach. It was smart for the prologue car to be an A+, and for week 1 to start you in a B. That way you feel what Yaz took from you. But a week later, you're in a new A+. A week after that, you've got multiple. As revenge gets ever closer, the prospect of getting your car back becomes ever less attractive.
Yeah, it was like, why do I even need this car? This is not the best car I can have. I've already better ones. Like the Skyline the Skyline R34 was like a similar good car, or even better than the Nissan we had. The Darren F1 was way better. The Nissan GTR was also way ahead. Lotus as well, and
I have Porsches and McLarens before the Grand, and cars I have formed a greater bond to than I ever did to that crummy old Lambo. The writers could not have avoided this problem, I acknowledge. My point is simply that the car does absolutely nothing to motivate the story. A far less forgivable failure is that of Alec, the unseen benefactor of the Grand, the one who actually plotted to rob Rydell. By all means, he is the true villain of Need for Speed Unbound, so that Criterion doesn't even put a face to the name is baffling. For the most part, he is mentioned in passing, and your revenge on him is limited to simply being told that he's gone broke at the end. Emphasizing revenge on Alec could have gone a long way to alleviating Unbound's lacking will. The indifference towards beating Yaz, winning the Grand, or getting our car back leaves you thirsty for any story content whatsoever to engage, or interest, or to simply fill the void, something Unbound just doesn't have. So let's address what little we've got. With cutscenes few and far between, the story throughout the campaign will be delivered through dialogue. There'll be conversations in the garage, phone calls in the car, and broadcasts over the radio. Some of these conversations have decent writing behind them. For every 10 jokes, about 1 is actually funny. A staggering success compared to Heat and Horizon. We're also given some valuable insight into why Rydell wants Yaz's car back.
He's very sarcastic about it. I really did not like any of the dialogue. Like, genuinely, there's like the ones that I would say were positive were the ones who tried to be funny, but like couldn't even turn it off. You had to listen to it. And I know for the first time ever in a game, I had periods where I just put my headphones down and wasn't listening just so I don't crash out.
In an early chat between him and Tess, he opens up about his late father, that it was his car until Yaz and the protagonist took an interest in what they thought was a heap of junk. This mattered, because it's a touch of real motive. Sadly, what's said in the garage is what's least likely to...
It's his car and we are driving for it. Why was he not at the race watching? That would be so cool.
Be heard. You'll oftentimes have no upgrades to make and head out before anyone has a chance to speak. It's easy to miss the few things that matter, but driving through Lakeshore, it's hard to miss the many things that don't. Tess's 28th dumbass quip. Rydell expressing that he's proud of you, kid. I'm glad there's something to fill the silence. But the repetition of meaningless car chatter in a story lacking for substance is baffling. Unbound spins its wheels relentlessly, and it's not long before you've given up on the hope that it'll ever find traction.
All nothing.
Even the radio shows regarding Lakeshore's politics are practically reiterations of the same paragraph. Mayor Stevenson has a financial conflict of interest with her sponsors, and struggles to justify her obsessive persecution of street racers. Her electoral opponent, Holden Parker, is old and out of touch, whilst the Lake Lab podcast is progressive and makes vaguely progressive suggestions in a progressive vocal tone.
But like, what does this add to the story? Like, only the first candidate has an actual something to do, but it has also zero impact on the story. Like, what are we listening that for? Who wants to hear that?
Rinse, repeat, forever. There's a semblance of escalation in week 4 when Stevenson fires her campaign staff and we learn that the host of Lake Lab is Stevenson's daughter, but this goes no further, and it is far too little, far too late. You know, they don't even tell you why street racers are being so harshly persecuted. Is it a personal vendetta for Stevenson? Is it corruption? Corruption from who? And why? So what's left? Well, don't be so glum, for we have the privilege of being graced with the presence of world-famous Minecraft speedrunner A$AP Rocky. He personally introduces the takeover events, with a grand total of 3 potential lines. 3. There are more than 3 takeover events, you guys. It starts to feel like Criterion couldn't afford him by the end of week 1, which starts to make it feel like the cross-promotion emotion it is, instead of an organic part of the game. You'll get a unique SOS call from Rocky in week 3. The protagonist relentlessly fangirls over being in the same car as him,
Yeah,
and he
we
shifts
were
the
glazing a
conversation
lot.
awkwardly to his inspirations and worldview. At no point does any of this sound scripted or inauthentic, but that's probably because it is literally a studio interview that Criterion attempt to edit into something that sounds like a natural conversation.
But for me, it's more so just making it, just showing people that we're all relatable in the same sense that
They fail. Horribly. It sounds like you're listening to a podcast, but that doesn't mean it's not interesting. It is,
It's
for 2
not.
minutes, and you'll never speak again. So,
It's not
that leaves
interesting.
us with she who must not be named. Tess, your manager, who you hire on day 1 to, manage. Not to call you twice a day with her inane, quirky banter, but hey, like every other form of dialogue in this game, most of what Tess says is the same. Hey Speedy, I'm being super weird to deflect your suspicions that I may not have your best interests at heart. Haha, so random, XD, bye! As you might imagine, this gets tiring quickly. 1, because it's repetitive, and 2, because it's completely botched. All of this is leading up to an eventual blowout between you and Tess at the end of week 3. She wants to
And even that is not so hard. It's like, yeah, what the fuck was that idea? We're still talking. We're not hating each other. It's nothing. It's no
fix
emotions.
the final race. You don't. The reason this falls so completely flat
This feels like 10-year-olds trying to have a friend group, but they don't want to. But then they see each other all the time, so they are. But they don't want to. But because they're all in the same place, they are. No, hardly relatable. But
is the build-up. Tess has been the sussiest of buckers from day fucking 1. During an early delivery contract, she explains the police who gave chase were simply the stunt team for a movie, an excuse so obviously weak that we and the protagonist take it as a confession of her dishonesty. She is lying, and putting us in danger for her personal gain. So isn't it weird the protagonist seems to have forgiven her come the next delivery? Isn't it weird that as time goes on, we jump from 50% suspicious of Tess, to 100%, to 10%, to treating Tess's lies as one of her quirky personality traits, to falling out in week 3 over fixing a race. So 15 instances of life-threatening risk was fine, but cheating in a race is too far. All this would make the protagonist seem completely
I said the same right when that happens. Like, that's what's making you not like her anymore?
insane, and Tess seemed like the luckiest scumbag who ever lived, but it doesn't, because you stop taking it seriously a third of the way through. Your reconciliation with Jasmine during week 4 happens too quickly. Even for a character as kind-hearted as the protagonist, being back to buddy talk in 2 conversations time is too fast to feel human. In every way but this, it works. Unbound keeps up its high standard of voice acting and natural conversation. You feel the awkwardness, the uncomfortable silence, the latent tension, and the humor forced in by both characters to help relieve that tension. You get the sense Yaz wants this, badly, but struggles to be vulnerable. She's still caught between her resentment of family and her need for it, and it takes strength for her to finally say,
I just don't think that's well characterized in the game. It's like, now he says it makes sense, but like, actually feel it that much in the game? It's like,
the word sorry. But she does, and it lands.
Look who I found. Sounds pretty.
yeah, but she doesn't say sorry. She says, sounds pretty, smells nice too.
Smells nice too.
And he also can't face it. I mean, I get it
Ellen.
somehow.
Compressor shot.
Yeah, maybe she wanted to say it, but
Dude tried to fix it himself. I told him. Now I gotta undo it.
she is trying to actually say something, and he's not letting her also.
He did.
But in the end, she does never say sorry. Should have listened to you. Like,
Pain in the ass. So how's the height?
and he doesn't even say, yeah, apology accepted, or I take you in. It's like almost a comic relief what he's saying.
Overrated. You take the turbo out first?
Since when do you do things by the book?
Well, never too late to start.
And that's a sentence Radell should say.
Well, all right.
See, she never said sorry. And he never is like, I accept your apology. It's just, they say hi without saying hi, and then they're good again.
Subtext and organic character writing isn't something you expect from a racing game. No, it's not masterful, but it allows Unbound's paper-thin story to end on a genuine, heartfelt note, which, in a way that is both remarkable and entirely unsurprising, makes this the best writing in a racing game since Driver San Francisco. If only Criterion had the money or time to put something between its beginning and end, because nothing's going to change the fact that they wrote a false revenge story and expected it to uphold the game as if it were true. It feels like there is something missing from Need for Speed Unbound, a subtle feeling of emptiness that followed me from day one to the grand itself. And I don't just mean the story. It's the inorganic repetition of the campaign that made me feel like I was optimizing the street scene instead of living in it. It's the fact that I was not always convinced that the street scene even existed, and that though Lakeshore City was alive, I could not find its heart. But the racing is good. It's better than it's been for years. So play it, and then wait for 3 more years in the painfully familiar hope that Need for Speed will truly find itself again. Special thanks go out to Elle Hudson, Lex Williams, Dominic Jaworski, Andre Baltuta, holy shit.
Great video. Great video as always. See what the comments have to say. Yeah. True. Yeah. Black Panthers. We watched also his videos on it. The Black Panther. And I watched some more videos outside of this right now. He has good content on Need for Speed games, especially Need for Speed Unbound is what I've seen. Yeah. Yeah. They are. Yeah. So. Story's done. We have finished everything about Need for Speed Unbound. We will continue with Fortnite streams as we have always. Today we will not have a Fortnite stream, but we will have one. Ja.
Amigo, habe ich irgendwas verstanden?
Guck mal in den Stream, ich bin gerade jetzt erst fertig geworden mit dem Video und ich muss noch Wäsche aufhängen, habe ich dir gesagt, Kumpel.
Das ist nicht einfach hinterher, sonst wäre jetzt fertig geworden.
Ja, Bro, ich habe gesagt, ich habe noch eine halbe Stunde Video zu reacten. Like, und wir haben bis 20 nach oder 35 bis 30 gesprochen.
Du bist ready, was kaufst du?
Ja, weiß ich nicht. 20 Minuten oder so?
Oh, da ist schon Fortnite 2 rausgekommen.
Bro, du hast 21 Uhr gesagt. Ich habe für 21 Uhr geplant. Und dann rufst du um 19:30 Uhr an. Ja, aber 21 Uhr kannst du den Arsch schieben. Ich bin jetzt zu Hause. Ja, super. Und dann wunderst du dich, wo ich keine Zeit habe.
Fertig, wir sehen uns um halb.
Ja, ich hoffe für dich, das ist das letzte Mal, dass ich von dir höre. Ja. Alright. Yeah, guys. So Fortnite streams we will have Fortnite OG2 and on Saturday it will be, I think, 2nd of November. That should be the date. Yeah, Saturday it will come out, so we will be streaming that for sure. And then the next story game next to Fortnite that is constantly running just for us, we will have Need for Speed Heat. We'll download Need for Speed Heat and we will play that game. Really hyped. I have played it already 2 years ago. During COVID, I played it only when I had COVID and I really liked it. I have really good memories about it, although I was feeling very bad and I was very ill. I had a lot of fun with it. I really liked it, and I want to play it now, not only because I just haven't played it on stream, but also in contrast to Unbound, because it's been so late, but it's like the very next game. So yeah, I liked it. The story, we will play it. We will play the game offline, but yeah, let's see how we like it. Yeah. So that's that, guys. Thank you all for watching again, as always. And oh, maybe we can raid over to somebody live. Petiken is live. Let's go. So we're gonna raid over to Petiken, say hi, and yeah, guys, bye bye. Thank you all for watching.